And we're live. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, to today's topic where we are going to dive into the sore subject of addiction in men and how it is ruining their lives or the potential their lives could become. I have a great panel today. I have Joel from Sobriety University. I have my good buddy Steve, Esteban the Bold. We're launching this Lost Boys podcast together. Husband, you'll see him part of this project too. Dating coach, has all sorts of cool shit going on, private group. And you know what? I'm just going to get right into it. So first, we're going to start off by going around the circle, having everyone introduce themselves. Who they are, where they're from, what they're up to, and then what their personal story with addiction looks like. But before we do that, guys, before we get into it, please do me a favor, like the video if you haven't already done so, subscribe to the channel, ring the notification bell, enable all notifications because this content doesn't often get put in front of my audience as it should. Leave any comments down below, whether you disagree, agree, want to continue on the conversation. And share with your friends. That's an important one a lot of people don't do. If you get value out of this, feel free to send us on to your friends or anyone that you think this could be beneficial for. And then here in a second, I'll actually post a join link in the chat. So if you want to come up on stage, have any questions for us, then we'd be certainly glad to have you up. If not, feel free to just leave any questions, comments, Q&As in the chat, and we will get to them. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. Who wants to tell their origin story as it pertains to addiction?
I want to hear about Joel.
Yeah, me too. I'm interested in that.
Yeah, you're Mr. Sobriety University. And Joel, let's do that and then give us a definition of addiction too. I want to see kind of where our definitions vary because we all kind of view the world in different ways.
Sure. Name is Joel and I have a YouTube channel, Sobriety University. My story is I've always had an addictive personality and I really didn't know it until I got into like drugs and alcohol once I got into college, but I was pretty straight-laced growing up, went to Catholic church, got the good grades, did sports and stuff. So I think that really helped me not get too deep into addiction. And as soon as high school ended and the sports stopped giving me that validation that I was getting, like I wasn't in the paper anymore, all that external validation, I sought it out through weed. So weed has been my main addiction. And I got sober about 6.5 years ago. And through this journey, I've just noticed that I just have a lot of addictions to a lot of different things. I was like the husband said, alcohol was something I definitely struggled with. I got into nicotine, played around with, had a love affair with Molly, did some Adderall, basically the whole gambit. And today, just grateful to be sober and not dealing with this stuff anymore. I still do have addictions, and I think we're all going to touch on that a little bit, that it's not like a one and done thing. So I struggle right now with addiction to internet technology. So watching streaming movies, YouTube and stuff. And I had a binge actually recently. And so we'll probably touch on this more, just some of the consequences of addiction. And I know whenever I do an addictive thing, the next day I feel kind of out of it. My thinking's cloudy. I feel a lot of guilt and shame. And it's just every time I do it, it's a reminder that, hey, man, there's consequences to your actions and they're going to be apparent right away. I know you guys talk a lot about this in the dating sphere, is that as men, we see the consequences of our actions immediately. We don't get the luxury to kind of float around them. Although I did for a long time, but now it's like I can't escape it. And so that's an addiction I'm working on. And then kind of a weird one is addiction to salt. So salt can be quite addictive. It's I don't know, there's like some Andrew Huberman stuff. He talks about it. And whenever I do, I just fiend it. So those are two addictions I'm working on now, but grateful to be past the other addictions, the ones that were kind of really holding my life back. And so my definition of addiction is just doing something that causes consequences, causes harm to people you care about, to yourself, family members, etc., and just not being able to stop, even though the consequences are so in your face. And there might be that like initial thought that like, of course I can stop. Like it's just a substance or whatever. But when actually like it comes time to do it, it's very difficult. And it often takes many tries, other help from other people. And it can just be a confusing thing. So yeah, that's a little bit about me and Sobriety University.
Want to go on the horn, Steve? You up next?
Yeah, my name's Steve. I was an alcoholic, a gambling addict, nicotine addict, Salt addict, fast
Sounds
food
like an
addict.
AA
That's
meeting.
pretty much. Yeah, have been, used to be addicted to pretty much everything. In some cases, maybe even porn too. Salt, believe it or not, is something I'm addicted to. I don't see it as a bad thing, but just to be a little more common there. My addiction started probably in high school with alcohol, and it was more of a validation thing, kind of just going to parties, trying to be the cool kid. I was never really a popular guy growing up. I was great at sports, just like you, Joel. I was in sports. I had a pretty positive outlook in sports, but the lack of social, I don't know what you want to call it, the lack of social proof kind of pushed me. My attention wasn't on the sports; it was on alcohol. I ended up starting chewing tobacco and cigarettes in high school, both, using them kind of sporadically, depending on who I was hanging out with. That moved overseas, and that continued my alcohol addiction specifically. And I also did both. I both chewed and smoked at the same time. I still chew. I don't smoke, but smoke cigars, excuse me. So I do use a shitload of nicotine all the time, pretty much all the time. And then when I got back from the military, I was pretty much alone. Most of my family lived overseas, so I moved not only from alcohol and nicotine, but I moved alcohol and nicotine to gambling. I used it as a social crutch, just going to the casino to be around people without having to actually socially interact with people. I had some form of social anxiety. I didn't realize until maybe 3 or 4 years into that point. Haven't really done that short of sports betting. I still sports bet, but I don't casino gamble anymore. And I would go through spurts of that for, 14 years? 13 years. I was 21. I'm almost 34 now. So that had been a problem for a while. Never really a porn guy or anything crazy like that, but I guess I'm probably like an OG information addict. I'm constantly consuming information, and I feel real awkward when I don't. I feel like I'm uninformed. And my definition of addiction is doing something unconsciously and not being able to control the impulse when you recognize that you're about to partake in that addiction. And that's if there's an impulse control disorder, essentially.
It's good stuff. All right. I'm actually going to start before I forget on what is addiction. To me, addiction to something is choosing to do something even when you know the consequences, but doing it anyways. Okay? So like when you think about, all right, I'm going to go out and I'm going to drink tonight even though I got to be up early for a work meeting the next day. And then what do you know? You're either hungover as fuck, you look like shit, or you sleep right through it. Addiction to me is when you have something that will completely consume your time and push away all other responsibilities. I know we all, like, even when we talk about porn, I know that there's many times that people will watch porn and they'll watch porn for far too long. Like, I mean, how long does it take to actually get to the point that you're trying to get to? That takes like 5 minutes. But instead, there you are for an hour and a half. So that's my definition of addiction. And so myself, HUDs, as Jaron had mentioned, I am a dating coach. I work with guys. You can find me on IG right over here. If you want to reach out for anything, I do consults and whatnot with people. I've struggled a lot with addiction. I am probably one of the best cases, but worst cases of this. I never really enjoyed hard drugs, but I did, and I still do have problems with alcohol and nicotine. I mean, you'll see I'll vape a little bit during this stream. And weed as well. It's been all over the place. It's just everything that gives you that excitement, even gambling too. I mean, hell, I can definitely admit that. I love the rush. I hate it, but I love it at the same time. So, what, thinking back to my story with alcohol, like it got to the point where I actually had to go to an alcohol counselor for a while because I had to seek help in managing it. Now, today I'm not sober. I still drink here and there with my girl, with other people, with friends. And that's going to be an interesting one, Joel, that I think we're going to enjoy talking about, because I'm very much of the mindset of moderation. However, I know a lot of people can't do moderation because addiction is a beast. It is a beast. And if you cannot conquer it, which most people cannot, it's just going to lead you to self-destruction. So that's just kind of my story, a preface, and I'll leave it up to you, Jan.
All right, cool. I'll bring it on home for the addiction origin stories. I was kind of like Joel in the sense I was a really straight edge kid. Grew up in a small conservative town out in the country, very strict German immigrant grandparents, and I would have never imagined myself in terms of forming my identity at a younger age as someone who would be addicted to anything. And a lot of times you find yourself in these addictive type behaviors, and then you're like, oh God, like I ended up being that person. I never would have thought I would be. So I was of the mindset like cigarette, like I thought that I would never smoke cigarettes when I was younger. I was like, oh, it's the grossest thing. I won't put a single one in my body. Whoops, little did I know. And it's kind of like Steve. It's funny, you guys have said a lot of things that resonate with me. So I think we have some themes emerging here. But kind of like Steve, I wasn't the most popular kid, but we covered it on last night's show, which we covered food addiction, which there is a component of food addiction when it comes to being overweight or obese. Or even on the other side of the equation, like bulimia, anorexic type disorders. Those are all kind of, I'd say there's a degree of addictive behavior patterns involved in those. But so when I was in high school, like I just kind of wanted to fit in. I never really thought I was popular. As an adult now, people that knew me in high school, like, dude, everyone liked you. And then I think back, like, oh yeah, like I never got bullied. I never didn't not have friends. I just had a low self-image and low self-esteem. So I didn't realize at the time, it's maybe 14, 15 years of age. I know a lot of my friends started drinking, started smoking weed. Some of them even started getting laid around then. Some of them even younger than that, for heaven forbid. And I was still kind of staunch, like, oh, weed, bad, bad, bad. Marijuana, bad, can't do this. And I had a buddy, he seemed really chill. Like he was always kind of wired and kind of got in trouble a lot, but he was always really chill when he smoked. And it was known that he was a pothead at school. And he was one of my best friends, or at least one of the guys I hung out with, I think like freshman, sophomore year. So I remember the first time going to his house and he pulls out a pipe and like there's a little bit in the bowl. And I'm like, I bought into all the propaganda, like reefer madness style, like, oh no, this is going to kill me. And no, pretty much what it did is it just slowed me down. It chilled me out and we watched cartoons and we had a good time. We just laughed all night. So I immediately liked weed when I was a teenager, but I still carried the stigma as far as like, okay, like I'm a good kid. I was usually at or near the top of my class in any sort of subject. I wasn't the best athlete, but I wasn't bad either. I always had a spot on the team. Same with music. I always had a spot in the band. Really, I could just kind of navigate between these groups however I wanted. But my own identity was like, no, I'm a good kid. Again, looking back, I got kicked out of class all the time. I was in detention all the time. I was a couple of years ahead in school, so thank God they sent me to junior college my junior year, and I was working, and they gave me a job on the radio. So they kept me busy. I'm kind of on the hyperactive side too, and that's probably where it really started. They put me on Adderall when I was a kid, which I've mentioned this before. I think that was a terrible thing to do to a child. Like really ADHD. Yeah, okay, yeah, you might be a little higher thought speed. But really, it's just a lack of attention in your external world. It's because your parents don't give a fuck about you. When it really comes down to it. That's why these kids need that constant attention. My hand would always raise up and I'd always cut off the teacher. And I was a class clown and all that. So I'd say the core underlying issue that required these substances or that led me to substances in the first place, it was there at a very young age. And it was very apparent. So the weed thing did that kind of privately in my bedroom. I'd do it at night, really just to slow me down, and then I'd play guitar and go to sleep. And it was kind of my little secret. I'm sure my family knew because they grew up in the 70s. My parents, they knew what's up. But I'd smoke out the window and then just kind of chill and just kind of do my own thing. And then in college, I didn't do much weed at all. I did it very seldomly, maybe a couple times a year. At that time, I started working for an internship for a government defense contractor, got a clearance right out of college, walked out of college into a government clearance job. So I spent 15 years or so of just no weed at all. Not that weed is bad. It's just I can't do it. And that's where alcohol comes in the mix. So similar, about 14, 15 years old, I think it was about the first time I drank. I knew that there were alcoholics on both sides of my family. I'd listened to Loveline with Adam Carolla and Dr. Drew all through the 90s. It was syndicated on the West Coast, 10 p.m. That was kind of part of my ritual. And Dr. Drew used to always talk about the alcoholic gene. How do you know you have it? Well, if people are dying on both sides of your family at a very premature age, you probably have it. So I knew better. But the first time I got drunk, of course, like a lot of us do, I got sick. I still can't look at 99 bananas without getting the, in my gut. But even despite being sick the whole next day, I remember I fucking loved it. I felt good. I felt alive for the first time in my life. And then we strung that into a couple nights. My buddy and I and his older brother, old enough to buy us beer, we'd just go to the basement and get fucked up. And we would, and same thing with the weed, we'd laugh and we'd giggle. And although I probably physically preferred weed, there's still such a stigma around it that I kind of kept that hush hush. But at school, like, and really the area I grew up in, if you smoked weed, you're like, oh, you're a loser. Like, you're a skater, you're an emo, you're a goth, you're some sort of fucking weirdo loser. Most of those kids had really bad grades, and I was focused on grades. I'm like, oh, I just kind of falsely assumed that it's gonna hurt me academically if I smoke weed. But with the alcohol, you're cool. Like, if you can fucking hang, you're the cool kid. So I was never what I consider the cool kid in high school. But again, like, I never got openly invited, but I was never turned away. I could go to the cool parties. I hang out with cool kids. I hang out with cool kids from other high schools too. So that started forming a part of my identity. And also, I am very fun when I'm drunk. People really like me. I'm usually pretty introverted in my day-to-day life. I'm very
I
structured.
don't know, man.
Thinking.
You're pretty fun. You're pretty fun all the time. So I don't really know what you're
Really?
talking about.
Oh, we'll get to that. I'm smoking. So, so alcohol that carried on through college, drunk, pretty much any excuse to get drunk, you do it. And then, started working for the defense contractor, and then the party kind of continues. Like, that's a good old boys club. I worked for one of the big guys. They sent me all over the place, and all those guys got fucked up. And that was the first time I tried cocaine, like 19, 20 years old in Manhattan. They're like, hey, you have a speaking engagement at 8 a.m. It's 5 a.m. as we're rolling in from the strip club. And the 55-year-old senior VP from Dallas, he's like, hey, take a, do this. I'm like, oh no, like that's a bad drug. That's a really bad drug. And then he's like, dude, just fucking do it. And I did it. And I'm on stage, sharp, crisp, sweating, and still kind of got from the night before, but it fucking reset the clock. So fortunately, I've never had a cocaine problem. I've used that recreationally. I was in Cancun last week, did a little blow. Prior to that, maybe a year and a half before I used it last. It happens so infrequently, I can't remember. But usually when someone whips out the blow, and if it's someone I've been talking to for a while and we're already having a good conversation, I'm like, all right, like, we can take this up to turbo speed. And, bro, business idea, bro. So that kind of energy. Yeah, like, they always do that. Within that class of drugs, I've done the Molly, the MDMA. Ecstasy was really big when I first came to college down here in Mexico when I was like 19 or so. But again, I did that seldomly. I never looked for it. If someone had it, I did it. To be honest, I have like most of this shit here in the house, but it's just kind of like, I view drugs as tools now. So we'll get to that real quick. But I never really had any problem with coke, amphetamine, any of those class drugs, methamphetamine, any of that stuff. It was really just always alcohol, weed. I took off for like 15 years. Alcohol carried over into my adult life. So when Steve and I met, that was my first job out of college. So rented a big ass house, brought a bunch of old high school buddies in there. Don't do that. It's a bad idea. Always turns into a disaster because it was a party house. So I'm trying to like start my career off right, and everyone's getting fucked up every night. We had some dope parties too. So there were many nights it'd be like 6 a.m. I'm sitting at the bottom of the stairs leading to the basement, which is where the parties were at, 'cause it's a large unfinished basement, just drinking beer. Like, fuck, I got to go to work. And again, at the time you don't realize it. So that kind of continued throughout my adult life. And then it got to a point, like my red pill origin story, which you guys can watch the videos on my channel to see that. I was like 27 or so. And that's like when all the rock stars die. When I finally like, had that sobering moment, and actually kind of my buddies pulled me aside, like, dude, like, what are you fucking doing? You're killing yourself. Like, knock this shit off. And they forced me to go to the gym, and then I sweated out all the booze and the depression. And I was like, oh yeah, like it's nice being jacked, because I was in good shape when I was in college. And that kind of got me, okay, I need to renegotiate my relationship with alcohol. So I do it very seldomly now. Again, I was in Cancun last week. I got drunk on the first day because my tolerance was shit. So I only had like 4 whiskeys, but I'm like just messed up. Turns out the second day is usually better. That second day I didn't drink. Third day, I think I had 4 whiskeys, but throughout different points in the day. So, I didn't really bugged me too much, and then haven't drank since. And I don't plan on drinking until I'm at a party or until whatever event comes up. But it's usually more social or recreational type use that I use with alcohol. Again, any of your cocaines, your amphetamines, your MDMA, any of that class of drugs, that's all for recreational stuff. I was at EDC a couple of weeks ago. Towards the end of the night, sometimes you need a little tacha or the ecstasy. So that's really popular in Mexico. It's pretty good here. So that's my history there. And then the marijuana thing, I took 15 years off or so during COVID in California. The sheer boredom, I started smoking weed again. But I got really into it in terms I want to discover the plant, and I want to understand how these various strains affect me, how the terpene profile affects me, how THC versus CBD affects me. So I was saying the pre-call, I prefer lower THC. I've got a Jack Herrera pen right here. I think this one's diluted, so it's 7 or 8, but it's high CBD and high. The terpene I like is limousine, which makes you kind of more social, more outgoing, like you said, fun. So thank you, I appreciate it. I was doing numbers all day, so I was bored with myself at that point. But I use weed mostly as a tool, not to get fucked up. Yes, there's usually gonna be some THC, but I try to go on the lower end and then look for other properties in the plants that give me other tertiary or secondary type benefits. And my definition of addiction is really just anything that gives you a dopamine release that creates those ingrains in your brain to where you need that stimuli or more to receive a similar effect. And the hard part about that is the more as you get into it, like I said, my first day drinking in Cancun, messed up off of 4 drinks. The second day, if I wanted to go at it, I probably could have drank all day and not had a problem. So your body is very, very flexible and very adaptable. So your brain will create these neural pathways to where it needs this substance, and it takes more to get that initial hit. And then you get to the point where even as you do more, you don't get that initial hit anymore. And when you really when I find myself addicted, which I'll find myself sneaking up too high in the THC content sometimes. When I go to California, all my friends smoke, and that shit is potent up there. They'll wake up, and entrepreneur type guys wake up, smoke a full J before breakfast and be on the day. And I'm sitting on the couch just buzzing, just whoa. And then I come back to Mexico, and my little watered down weed doesn't do shit for me. It's I need it to feel normal, to not feel shitty. And that's when you're addicted. So for me, it's whenever that brain mechanism or process engages to where it's okay, we're now accustomed to this outside substance or stimuli. It could be behavioral, it could be porn, could be gambling. For me, guys, I talk about game a lot on my channel. Sometimes you go on spurts to where all the pussy kind of feels the same, and every girl, it's kind of you're just masturbating in a warm body. And then you get to that point, okay, there is a sex addiction component, or you need more and more. You're choking her, slapping, spitting, pulling her hair, and the girl's hey, I was a virgin a year ago, and she's terrified. She doesn't know what the fuck's going on. So that's where you got to be all right, boom, boom, pull back the reins a bit, and I'm a little too far into this. Let's either back off, taper off, which you reduce frequency or the intensity, or just go cold turkey. And I'm pretty disciplined internally. My internal structures are very concrete and disciplined. So usually I just go cold turkey. I'm gonna feel like shit for a day or two, and then just get that get the necessity for that stimuli or de-stimuli out of your system. So that's my take on addiction. And maybe go around the horn again, guys. I want to present this topic to you. Going through my story, and it sounds like some of you too, you've noticed that there is a consequence component, there is an emotional component, but it's almost there's a hierarchy. There's good addictions and bad addictions. I got addicted to the gym a few years ago, to the point where it was giving me consequences, negative consequences in life, but I was jacked and I felt good. And that former low sense of self-esteem, that was pushed down again. Oh, I'm the big guy, I'm the strong guy walking around. So I'd say a gym addiction maybe is better than a methamphetamine addiction. So is there a hierarchy? Are there good and bad addictions? What does that look like? And then in terms of frequency of use too, at what point does something become an addiction? And kind of like my story, when I catch myself in that area, that's when I'm whoa, this is addiction territory. Let's back up a bit.
Well, first off, I have to say a methamphetamine addiction and a gym addiction, they're pretty much equal to me. I don't really see what the problem is. But Joel, I want you to go first. We'll just keep doing it that way.
That's great. Yeah. I think the same thing, right? Why not just use meth, right? Yeah, I think that's a good question. And it depends on the person for sure. I say that to myself too. I'd rather be eating salt than, shooting heroin. So it's at the end of the day, like I've almost wondered, and hearing your guys' story, I think sometimes like, have I gone too hard with the addiction? Have I become addicted to not being addicted? Because you guys are all successful. You're able to use substances here and there. And so I think when it gets to a point where it's like, okay, is this causing too much harm for me to where it's really interfering with my life, to where I'm maybe losing relationships, I'm not being productive at work, I'm not reaching the goals that I'm setting. That's usually a sign that it's interfering. And for me, that's a sign that's like, okay, it's time to, again, take that step back and then kind of reset the dopamine levels and then try again. So, like with the internet and technology stuff, for example, like I'll take like a week, 2 weeks off from not watching any sort of streaming, looking at any screens whatsoever. Like I'll listen to stuff, like listen to podcasts. I'll just have it on in the background, but I won't actually look at the screen. And then I'll go back and after like a couple of weeks and I'll try it again and see like, hey, maybe I can do this, sanely now. Just for my personality, just never works. I just am right back into it. It just consumes my whole life. And it's like, all I want to do is like, why would I go to work when I can just watch TV all day? And that's kind of a sign that it's gone over the top. So whether there's good or bad addiction, um I don't know. I think it depends on the person. I try not to label it too much, like whether it's good or whether it's bad, just whether like what are the actions that it's affecting, like is it negatively impacting my life or is it positively impacting my life? And if that's the case, then maybe it's something that I can continue using, like porn, for example. That one, and they always start off good. I don't know if you guys experience this,
Mm.
but they're never like from the first rep, you're just like, oh, my life's going to shit. There's
Mhm.
always like a fun component, like with gambling. I love gambling. Porn was great. It opened my eyes a little bit to stuff about females and stuff, which I didn't get growing up in the Catholic Church. So it started off great, but then it just slowly deteriorated. So yeah, I'm curious what your guys' thoughts are
Joel,
on
I was
that
going to
as
ask you
well.
too. So it seems like, and you're more of an expert on this than I am. That's why I got you on here. But it seems like one of the recurring themes is there's a mitigation versus reduction versus like absolute elimination strategy. Because I've met guys before, they're like that. They're so, like you said, you're addicted to not being addicted. I've met guys that don't drink and gone out with them, and it's oh yeah, dude, like 2 years, 3 months, 7 days sober. Like congrats for you. And they're like,
Mm.
but can't do it on alcoholic, or like there's a lot of anxiety. Hey, your friend's gonna think I'm weird if I don't order a beer. I'm like, dude, just order a diet soda and tell them there's whiskey in it. Like no one's gonna grab your drink and be like, oh, there's no alcohol. Fuck,
Yeah.
bro. But like they have almost as much energy about being sober as they do towards the addiction, if not more. So it seems like a lot of us use mitigation strategies. I'm vaping here. Didn't mention it. I got to a point that cigarettes are bad, and then I started putting weed in them to go to the clubs here. And then before I knew it, I was smoking 2 packs a day. So now, as long as I don't inhale the actual smoke, I use like dry vape for the flower, for the herb, and then these guys. Then for me, it's not elimination, but it's like a successful mitigation strategy to the point where like, okay, I like nicotine, I like caffeine, but how do I minimize the risk while still getting what I want out of that substance? So it'd be interesting for you guys to comment on that too, if that resonates with you.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a good point you bring up, that like, and I think everyone who gets sober goes through that period where it's almost like it becomes a new ego identity. It's like I dealt with that too. I was like walking around with like feeling like I was a hot shot because I was sober. And really I was just feeling insecure that I couldn't partake in all the activities and hang out with my old friends like I used to. So I think everyone goes through that a little bit. And then eventually they realize that no one cares either way, whether you're using or whether you're sober, or whether whatever, as long as you're just like being a good person and not messing things up and adding value to each other's lives. Like that's really what matters. And so again, it's like it's very personal. So like Jaron, you are somebody that can do that, like can mitigate well, can use weed here and there. Other people like myself, I can't. Like I've tried very hard and it just doesn't work. And I thought about a lot like why that happens, but I'm not entirely sure. It might just be like a biological thing. Could have to do with like growing up in a certain environment as well, like being really close with your family. Like I was adopted, so I had a lot of trauma from growing up. And I like all my friends that came from like stable households, or at least semi-stable households, they seem to do all right with substances. Like they don't have to
Mhm.
get sober or anything.
When you do some of the internal work on yourself too, because I've noticed through my transformation that drugs that I hadn't done in a while, if I revisit them, they affect you differently as your worldview changes, as your experience changes, as you iron out some of the kinks in your internal belief system. I call it internal operating system. You have a strong sense of self. You can still get high, but you're grounded. So the experience, it's like you're taking a completely different drug. As you, like I said, they're checkpoints. Like cocaine, I do that very seldomly, maybe once every year and a half, 2 years or so. But every time it's a bit different because it brings out certain sides of yourself. But in the meantime, in that hiatus, I've done a lot of internal work on myself. So it's almost like a new drug every time. I do the seldom ones, the recreational ones.
That's super interesting. I didn't thought about it that way because that is so true. I experienced the same thing. Like I don't
And the
touch
booze.
a lot of, I don't touch a lot of these drugs very often. Outside of alcohol and weed, it's sparingly as well. But when you do it after a long period of time and you've been working on so many other things, working on yourself, yeah, that's a concept I'd like to talk about at some point. I can't even wrap my head entirely around it right now, but I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, it's something I noticed. That's why I threw it out there. And a lot of times, you'll see on my channel, I'll just say, "Hey, I noticed something," and that's me. I don't have a fully formed thought on it yet, but I want to throw it out there and kind of chew it up and spit it out and put it back in your mouth and swish it around and see if it sticks and see if there's something to it. But yeah, that's something I've noticed over the last few years. And then every time I'm in that situation, it's more and more profound to where
I've noticed one thing too, is that when you may have used a drug or something like that a lot in your past, you haven't touched it for years, and then you go to use it and you despise yourself while being on the drug.
I'm like that when I drink. I felt guilty that whole day. I was like, I should be working. I'm here at this fucking resort and I'm drunk and there's foam cannon party. Like, you piece of shit. And then day two, I only smoked weed. I'm like, hey, enjoy yourself. You've worked really hard. You've got a week off. You're on vacation. Chill.
Because you're looking at the experience from a completely different lens. And I think that's what's really interesting. That's kind of what you're talking about.
Whereas when I worked for the defense contractor, I'd come home and like, I was ready to get drunk. That was a part of my identity, but it led a lot of that. It buried some of that depression, or that I had anxiety real bad too. So it buried that anxiety in my gut. But Steve, I remember you and I spent like a week or two in Miami, and it was really just us like unpacking childhood trauma. But it required us being fucked up the whole time. Whereas when I go to Miami now, I'll still drink, but it's like me trying to hit on Latinas and having fun with my bros and cruising around the city and checking out the social scene. It's a completely different experience.
Yeah, I tend to put my addictions in boxes as far as severity, right? So like the top of it, because the most recent ones, probably I would say alcohol and gambling are at the very, very top as far as casino gambling specifically. Like sports betting is not like I'm $50 or something in on a week, and my justification is I use it to be interested in the result of the sport because I don't care. Otherwise, if I don't have something going on as far as the sport is concerned, I don't give a shit who wins, does what. I don't have a favorite sports team, but I'm an analytical guy. I like going through the data, like seeing who's going to win here, there, whatever. As far as alcohol, I made a pledge to my dad on January 10th to go 365 days without alcohol. I haven't drank in like 75 days or something like that. But that's something that when that 365 days comes up, I'm going to have to revisit because I'm not sure, because my life has gotten significantly better from January 10th to now, that I'm not sure that I want to even revisit it. Right. It's like, so I think there's a hybrid, like the hierarchy. Yeah. I think that we subconsciously put like the level of the severity of the addiction. We kind of put it in that no-go box. Like I won't touch anything. Like I did Adderall a little bit, like every once in a while, if I needed to get something done, I had a friend who had it, whatever, I would do it. But it wasn't like, oh, I need to get my Adderall now. You know what I mean? So if I was in a tight spot where I needed to do something like, and have 100% focus, I would probably consider doing it again because I do it so little, right? It's not really that's probably one of the things that isn't really an addictive thing for me. But I would say nicotine's probably the hardest because it's most readily available. Second, like I rank it second as far as social or as far as acceptance. Like that's the other thing. That's the other factor that we haven't really touched on is socially acceptable addictions. Alcohol is the number one socially acceptable addiction in the world, probably. Number two is probably nicotine of some sort, smoking cigarettes, whatever. People don't.
In there.
Caffeine. Okay,
caffeine.
so I throw caffeine in
Sure.
there. I'm certainly a caffeine addict too. But that was once I quit alcohol, I was a caffeine addict. Yeah. Once I quit alcohol, I became a caffeine addict because when I was on alcohol, I couldn't drink things with caffeine because my body was so sensitive. But as far as like nicotine, I place in more of a longer term, mid range box. Like it's not going to be necessary. Well, not even nicotine. Using tobacco products specifically. Over the long term, I put it in like a moderate risk category because I tend to go off and on it. That's what's really interesting too. It's like I'll go 3 months chewing 3 cans a day, and then I just won't buy it for another 3 months, and I won't think about it. Right? Maybe the novelty in my mind because I grew up in a rural setting near Jaron, and I played baseball and I participated in rodeo and I was in agriculture. Like, I mean, these are all like social proofs in my head for this particular substance. And now I work in the construction/insurance business, and it's even more so, right? So there's the social dynamic of that. But yeah, I see it as hierarchy. Yeah, I think they're all serious to some degree, but I think that we put the severity in boxes, and there are some that are going to be worse for you than others. I think, like touching on the gym addiction, I was moderately addicted to the gym, but I wasn't really addicted to the gym. I was addicted to the reaction that I got from other people when I took my shirt off. I was more socially addicted to the gym than I was anything else. That's where I think steroids comes in really heavily for a lot of the fitness community, and where they kind of cross that line from healthy to non-healthy. So I really don't think there's a one size fits all in the whole thing, because there are people like me. I use these when I'm on streams because they're just they're just nicotine packs, right? But nicotine has a positive effect on neuro something or other. I don't know. I watched Andrew Huberman podcast where he was talking about nicotine being good for retaining information. It's neuroprotective against like Alzheimer's and dementia. And I'm like, oh, okay, cool. So I chew. Nice. But then you're like, oh yeah, but that's it. At the same time, if you do it too much, you could get cancer. So there's kind of two sides.
I've got scars in my chew spots, and I only chewed for a couple years in high school. Again, it was really cool. My freshman year in baseball, the coach gave us all a chew and then had us run the bases, kind of like the Sandlot. If you remember that old movie, Until We Throw Up, it was kind of like your initiation. And then the cool kids always had a Copenhagen ring in the back of their jeans. And I grew up on a farm too, so I wasn't smoking cigarettes yet at that time. So I started chewing, actually, because, again, that was acceptable in that environment. And guess what? When you're doing harvest, it's nice to have a dip in your lip. It's stressful,
and I live in the Midwest too. I live in the Midwest now, and like the most popular thing sold at the gas station, besides probably beer, is Copenhagen Wintergreen. It's always out, right? And that's purely, that's purely fucking cultural. As far as like where we live,
we had a group of guys that would dip. They were like the country boys, and they made a beer pong table out of all their dip cans.
Yep,
it was really nice. It was really impressive.
Something like that.
That used to be a thing. They used to make fucking chew pyramids and shit. Like it was.
My older cousin did the chew pyramid, and he was cool. He was like captain of the football team. Big old boy, played for like Tennessee State University. Drove a restored like 67 Camaro that my uncle and him spent years on. Still has that car. He was always the fucking cool kid. And he was like 10 years older than me. So when I came to high school, I was like, all right, like, I got a little bit of a legacy, in front of me. I was always kind of a nerd, but my two younger brothers were, one was 1 year or 2 years behind me. The other one was 3 years behind me. So we were all in high school at the same time. My brothers were cool as fuck too. Like they were all state athletes and prom kings and all that shit. And so there was kind of not that expectation, but it's like I had a model based on my cool cousin babysitting me when I was a kid, as far as like what the cool kids do. Now where I live, like most people, they think if you do drugs here in Mexico that you're a loser. Like there's still a big stigma around weed. A lot of people do it low key, but coke, like all the cool kids do coke, like all the rich people do coke. And you're not going to find it at just any random club. Like at the really nice places, there's gonna be a guy in the bathroom selling it to you.
Yeah. Well,
and bar probably hired him to be there.
So I think a lot of this boils down to social identity. It's just an identity issue in a lot of ways. My gambling addiction actually, when I lived overseas, I didn't understand gambling there. I knew there was a ton of it, but I was like, I'm just not interested in kind of like being a baby at this particular thing. So I kind of had it under wraps for a couple of years. And I mean, I didn't really even gamble that much prior to that, or at all. I don't think, actually. Now that I think about it, maybe I'd been to a casino once when I was 18 or something. But when I was over there, one of the channels on TV was poker TV. And I don't play poker. My brain moves too fast to play poker, but I knew that there were other card games, baccarat, blackjack, that kind of shit. And I got, like, one of my idols at the time was Phil Ivey. He was like big, heavy in the World Poker Tour, winning all the $10 million pots and shit. And I was like, oh, people make money gambling. That was what I convinced myself, because I didn't grow up with a family with addictions like that. Like, my dad was an associate superintendent of prison. He's pretty high up in the Department of Corrections now. My mom, she's heavy Christian, like really conservative, really rural conservative background. And I heard my aunt went to the casino like every weekend or something like that at some point. Right. So it didn't really register with me that it was bad. So when I went to do it, I got the dopamine. I got the social part that I needed, because if you're playing cards, people talk to you and stuff like that. You have a couple drinks and you're like, oh, I feel really fucking good doing this. I feel really, really good doing this. And I don't have to be friends with these people to do it. So it was like, I could always go to a party that I was always invited to. As far as you could go to the casino, the dealer would talk to you, the people around you would talk to you, and they were all friendly most of the time. And you didn't have to put any effort forth to accomplish that. You just had to show up, and it was 24/7. So traveling throughout my 20s, I just used that as an excuse to go to the casino, because I didn't know any people that were going to keep me accountable, short of Sharon, but I didn't know anybody that was directly in my face every day that was going to keep me accountable. So I would just go and enjoy myself.
You're fucking fat, bro.
Yeah. Well, I mean, at the time it wasn't, right? But it was it really did feel like there was, for a while, that there was an opportunity to like do it for a living. Like I had gotten to that point in that addiction where, like, I'm a pretty damn good blackjack player. I'm pretty good at baccarat.
You've transferred that to golf now too, which is a topic I want to get in here at some point on this stream, in terms of like replacing addictions, the behavior patterns with something more productive. But
didn't save me any fucking money, I can tell you.
But with the main topic, well, it's interesting too. You noted that it's largely a social lubricant, and that struck a thought in my head. Like, most of
golf is too.
I have like my day-to-day stuff, but it's more kind of productivity focused, the substances I use. So like Joel mentioned earlier, like normally I'd feel guilty. The ideal is to not be dependent on anything. And I'll do like 5-day dopamine fast every now and then. And when I come off of it, it'll be a while before I go back to stuff. But eventually I'm like, well, like, I don't feel bad, but I don't feel as good. And my progress is better when I have like my little system I'm executing here, with the coffee or diet soda or the Jack Herrera, Sunny Sativas or the nicotine vapes and shit like that. Like, it puts me in a certain energy wavelength to where I can really effectively just knock shit off all day. So it's more productivity. But when I do go in that recreation mode, where like the class of drugs that I use seldomly, and alcohol I use very seldomly too, it's always for the social lubrication factor. It just kind of blurs those lines and allows people to come into each other. So I think that's an interesting component of it. But I did want to start, we can continue on that point, or I wanted to start steering in the direction of how addiction is ruining men. And we have touched on this topic in terms of the negative consequences, whatever that looks like. What do negative consequences look like for you? For me, a lot of times it's health. So the reason I vape instead of smoking cigarettes is because it's better for my health. The reason I do weed instead of drinking nowadays is because it's better for my health, and I feel better. So that's why we touch on the topics like, are all addictions bad? Can some of them be good? What about moderation versus absolute elimination? And I think now let's start steering into like, where do guys do it wrong? Where does it start tearing their lives apart? And for guys watching, whether it's on the live stream or the replay, feel free to leave your comments to that question down in the comments below, or here in the chat. Again, if you want to come up, it's pinned to the top of the chat here on YouTube. So click that link and get up here and join us. But where do men take it too far? Where does it start going wrong to like, whoa, I need to like seriously reconsider? what I'm doing.
Here's a big one with it, and I think that's one of the things we were touching about, like what type of addiction is good and what type of addiction is bad. I think that the main problem is that when an addiction forces you to feel guilt afterwards is a huge one. So let's say, for instance, you love playing golf. I know we touched on that, but let's say that when you're doing when you're playing
The
golf,
camera's always reversed.
when you're playing golf and you're now playing golf every single weekend and you're not spending any time with your significant other or your family or your friends, and it's always golf, it's work, golf, work, golf, that's when you know that you have a problem. And if you feel bad about it,
Right.
Our bodies tell us things for a reason. So if you're doing something that makes you feel guilty or makes you second guess yourself, that's an addiction, and you're overstimulating yourself and you are not focusing on the right things in life.
Yeah.
That's one point I want to make on that.
Yeah, I think I can agree with that to some, I say some degree, just simply because number one, I play way more golf than that. Just saying, give credit where credit is due. But I tend to include my significant other in that. So she goes with me, or she'll go to the range and or go to the restaurant or do whatever. Right? She'll be around when it's going on, and it's an environment that I feel like I can focus, and she understands that that's an important thing to me. Right? So I wouldn't say that I'm addicted. I'm definitely addicted to the game overall. I definitely have it on every day. I'm definitely a golf bettor. I definitely spend a significant portion of my week with the game. But the game makes me happy, and I do not feel bad about that. 0%. I think it's probably I think it's probably the best. I think it's probably saved my life to some degree, because if I wanted to have all the best equipment, do all the best things with the game, I couldn't gamble as much. I couldn't afford it. Right? It doesn't like it's just relative. It's like, okay, $5,000 for a nice set of golf clubs, and entry fees are $300, and traveling to there, and then getting a hotel, and then you got to have a good diet and whatever, right? And so it really, honestly, it curbed everything else. And I actually started playing when I was alone instead of going to the casino. So yeah, I traded it, but somehow I managed to maintain what I believe is a very healthy frame with it, a passion for it rather than addiction to it, I guess, is probably the way.
I like that. We gotta clip that. That is fantastic. A passion.
Yeah, you dropped some gems.
Passion for it instead of an addiction to it. That is fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, like, if you think about it relatively, like, you can even use alcohol's a great example of this, right? Like, Jaren's very into, I call them designer, like, high-end whiskeys, right? Really, really likes whiskeys. I don't think that's a problem, because he doesn't drink high-end whiskey every fucking day. But it's super interesting because there's so many different, like, aging. I don't know shit about whiskey, so
you change your relationship with alcohol. So I mentioned recently I'm dating a stewardess, and she got in tonight. We're going to go out tomorrow. We're going to go to one of the nicest bars in Mexico City. So I'll do a high-end cocktail or two, but it's not like me throwing them back. Or like, I never do shots. I never shotgun beers. Even in party scenes, I never do any of that stuff. I don't want to spike my BAC because that's where you feel shitty. But it's a different experience when my goal in going out to this fancy bar is, I like sunsets too. So we're going to watch a bomb sunset and sip on a really high-end quality craft cocktail. But that's more of me like putting it in my mouth and kind of chewing on it and feeling how it interacts with the different parts of the palate and how it engages your flavor profile, or how you can actually develop your flavor profile too. You sniff it and you sift it and you put it in your mouth and you swill it around. It's an entirely different experience than like, all right, guys, party time, shots, or, Jello shots.
And doing that, like, okay, so and I'm going to probably throw a completely counterintuitive thought out there is that's not a bad thing sometimes if you're not physically like get sick addicted or have to drink every day addicted. Like the social aspect of
I won't
drinking.
get drunk. I won't get a headache. I won't be hungover. It'll
Right.
be like
Well,
2
I'm just
drinks
talking
and a
about,
steak. Yep.
and yeah, in general, it's like if I go down to Mexico City and visit Jaron, there's a high likelihood that we're going to end up at a bar just to have a fucking experience together, right? It's just part of being a bro, doing that part. And for me, because I made this commitment to my dad, that might have to wait a little bit. But as far as the bar, but there's a good that's the thing, that's the balance.
We
That's
can
what
do
the
mushrooms and go to the park. That's always fun.
exactly. See, we can do
Oh.
that too.
Yep.
But
All right.
yeah, like that's the line that like you get the I think the addiction specifically to that. I don't know why I'm riffing necessarily about this, but it's the too much of a good thing is a good thing. Like everybody knows that alcohol is toxic for your body, right? Just fundamentally, we know if you drink too much, you're probably gonna die. Cool. But like the social aspect of it is the good part. It gets you out there. Like once I quit drinking, I never went out. I go to the cigar bar every once in a while and I'll grab a nice cigar. I'm big into cigars, and I will drink a non-alcoholic beer. Right. I will do a St. Pauli Girl or a Heineken Zero or whatever, just to feel like I'm part of the social atmosphere, even though the non-alcoholic beer, like I'm not good with carbs and stuff. And those non-alcoholic beers tend to have higher carbohydrate contents. And I will take that. I will take the little bit of bloat the next day just to have a little bit more of a social experience and feel like I'm in some version of normal. Right. And I think that's where we fuck up really, is we just do that too much because it makes us feel too good in the process.
I agree with that. Yeah, like with golf, I kind of got addicted to golf. I'm not gonna lie, addicted to sports. So I play like pickup hoops, and there comes a time where it's just not fun anymore. So I think what you guys have been touching on is that once it stops becoming pleasure and it turns to the pain, is when there needs to be taking a step back and then kind of resetting the dopamine levels. Because I mean, it's crazy. It's like you're like, why do I feel the same way I did when I was addicted to marijuana than I am playing golf? Like I'm just hitting a ball around, right? But it just could become so consuming where I would just play golf like 24/7. I would just watch golf. I would just think about golf. And
Yeah.
it's tough because it's like it is better than using the substance. So I mean, I'm really thinking internally here because like you guys have such a different just approach to it, where
Yeah.
it makes me wonder, it's like, is going completely abstinent actually a good idea? Like I'm honestly
Well,
asking myself that to a degree. Yeah.
Well,
The question
that's a huge thing. You can go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, I just have one question is, are we addicted to being addicted to things? Are we addicted to putting something that we enjoy in a box? Are we addicted to the guilt behind the addiction?
Oh, that's
Because
deep.
because at the end of the day, it's not even about what you're doing, it's about what you're not doing. So are we addicted to the guilt? Are we addicted to the negative side of that? It's the opposite.
That's a good
play.
point. When I was drinking a lot in Houston, I had that thought a lot of times when I'd wake up hungover, go to work. Like I never got behind at work. Granted, I probably could have. No, you know what? Sometimes when I'm completely sober, I get a little too hyperactive and I'm all over the place and I'm not productive at all. So, but being hungover, it kind of slowed me down to a point where, like you said, I could be socially normal around people, but also it's like, okay, I have this impending problem that I need to take care of today, but I'm hungover. I feel shitty. I'll just do it tomorrow. And then when you drink every day, like tomorrow becomes never. And
tomorrow becomes never quick.
But here's the
you do have the
question.
guilt, but it felt good. It's like, okay, well, it's an excuse for me to not do what I need to do.
But here's the question with that. Like when you can just like push it off, like what if you can handle it? What if you can handle everything? What if you have that thing to do and you can just take care of it? Then is it a problem? I don't think guilt is 100% the issue when it comes to addiction. I think it's a big one, but I don't think it's 100% that. And that's just things that are churning in my mind. I mean, me personally, as I had shared with you earlier, Joel, and shared with everybody, like, yeah, I love alcohol myself. I've gone to alcohol counselors. gone through that stage years ago in my life. And instead of going sober, even though I did for a while, I still drink now. So what separates somebody from being able to have moderation versus being completely abstinent? I don't know that answer.
Heads up,
I
kid.
think it.
Oh,
Go
go
ahead.
ahead. I had a question for you. I'm curious about this. So the point earlier in terms of like whenever you experience a new substance, when you've taken some time off, it's a different experience. For you in your particular situation, I'm wondering, again, this thought just came in my head, but I've thought this before when I was drinking a lot. In terms of when you have more to lose, you really don't have as much motivation to do it. Like I'm assuming you've made more progress in every area of your life since then. So like it's easier to moderate because like I have a lot to lose now, or I have better. There's things I'd rather be doing than drinking. So why would I drink?
Right. That's a great point, because let me think about this right here. So drinking to me is kind of like a hobby, and it slows me down, as we've kind of talked about. It's nice to be slowed down because our brains move too fucking fast sometimes.
We're
It's
all
just,
like that, aren't we?
yeah, it's just our personality types, and we're wired differently. But one of the things that I did going through this experience, I don't take shots no matter what. Never.
Yeah, that's
And
nice.
I drink low alcohol, like low ABV drinks. So things like White Claws, things like that, so that I'm not spiking my BAC
That's
as
the key.
quickly.
Another
Exactly.
one at the club, I do bottle service, and like they'll pour my first one. So maybe I'll do like 1 or 2 normal drinks. And then once I'm good, then as the night goes on, I actually bring the alcohol down because I want that slow come up into it and I want the slow come down. And that's where you don't get hungover. It's when you take 7 shots and you're throwing up in the bathroom where you'll be sick tomorrow because your body goes from baseline to way up here to way back down. And that just wrecks you.
I think the biggest thing with it too is it's the discipline that you have to have for that. I truly think that some people don't have the discipline for it. And that's why AA and all the other ones exist, because you need to go fully sober. You can't, moderation, it for most people does not exist.
They have to put that addictive energy into not being addicted, but it's still that same core energy, it seems.
But that begs the question,
cool.
If, like specifically because the AA thing kind of sparked this, are they just or not they, are we, or is anybody who claims to have an addiction just addicted to being an addict? Like if you think the identity of being an addict, like, oh, I'm addicted to this, and it gives you an out, it gives you an excuse to not do it.
Well, there's that
Some
social
do.
component too. Again, to
Yeah.
AA, there's that social component to where,
Exactly.
okay, I changed out my bar buddies for my sober buddies. And
Exactly.
it is tough being sober in modern society. Like substances are everywhere. It's a major part of any sort of social type scenario.
It's like the same thing of saying I switched out my bar buddies for my golf buddies.
Yeah.
That's a really interesting thought, and I kind of think that's what it is.
Yeah, it's
gives you
certainly
like I'm getting addicted to doing live
Yeah.
streams. This is fun.
Yeah, I
look forward to this.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Because we're like
So
social animals, so we want to connect with other people. And
Yeah.
when people are at like the lowest of their low in addiction, they're usually unable to communicate with other people anymore. Like all their friends drop off because they're just kind of being an asshole or whatever. So when they get into those support groups, it's like they finally experience that connection again. And I experienced that too, 100%. Like I was like, wow, finally I can talk to people who understand what I'm going through, and it's not like I'm not like this weird outsider anymore. But it's tough to admit that, I'm just not doing well with the substance and I need to get into a group or something. But
I think the truth is though that nobody does well with that substance. Like that's at the end of the day, like that's why these groups exist. There wouldn't be an Alcoholics Anonymous without billions of alcoholics.
Alcohol's a tough one.
Yeah, it's a tough one because
it's a tough one to quit.
So socially acceptable. But
Yeah,
in the
same way you don't have like a eat healthy and work out anonymous. Like,
yeah, I mean, we're like, yeah, we all know it's bad, but we do it anyway. So we go to these groups to affirm that, like, oh, they know it's bad too. Like, what are we talking about? Of course we know it's bad. I don't need Shirley from down the street who's a teacher and closet vodka drinker to tell me the drinking's bad. I knew that shit. like, and if you go out, like, but again, it's the harmony of life. It's like, if you want to go out and be social and have a few drinks, do it by all means. I'm not saying don't do it. I'm saying just understand that if you go a little bit too far, you're going to pay some version of a price, because the world always finds a way to balance itself out. It always comes back to center one way or another, because now that Joe, I'm kind of speaking directly to you, now that you're completely, like, you're mitigating this in your head and it's all digits, it's constant, like, I can't be addicted to this, I can't be addicted to this. Now you're just addicted to not being addicted, so you're addicted to something.
For
Right?
sure. I think,
Yeah.
yeah, I think as just humans,
You're
we're
just
all
addicted to the lack
addicted.
of it. You're like, you're trying to stay so clean that it's, and I'm not like, that's not, definitely not an attack. It sounded like it almost,
No,
but
that's
it's
all
like,
good.
because I think about this all the time too. I'm very hard on myself. I'm
Mhm.
very, very hard on myself. And I think, oh man, oh, you chew, you're a piece of shit. No, I'm not. I'm just a dude who fucking just happens to do it. That's why they sell billions of dollars. There's plenty of me, right? I could walk into a casino. There's 10,000 people in a fucking casino at 4 o'clock in the afternoon on a Thursday. Like, okay, cool. So now there's the social proof of what you're doing. Okay, well, if I go there, I'm gonna find what I'm looking for, right? Versus, like, just accepting the fact that you're a fucking human being and you're gonna make mistakes. You're gonna make mistakes, and you don't have to be addicted to it. Like, you don't have to be. You choose to be addicted to it at the end of the day. I choose to be. I could just as easily go to the gas station and not go get a can of Copenhagen. I could
I
just
don't
as
know.
easily not.
I actually kind of disagree with that. There's a reason why it spikes certain receptors in somebody's brain versus another substance or another activity. You don't always choose to be addicted to it. Sometimes you are hardwired to do that. One of the things that I did with my alcohol counselor, I don't know if you guys have ever heard of it. Oh God, I'm gonna forget this name. I'm gonna have to look it up. But there is a drug that you can take when it comes to alcohol, and you take that
Mhm.
drug every day, and then when you have a drink, it doesn't give you the spike in dopamine.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Do you
I
know where you can
actually,
get this drug by chance? Just
yeah,
curious for a
I got
fact.
it through an online pharmacy, but you can get it prescribed too. Dude, this is like the coolest thing in the world. Actually, you know what? Let me be right back. You guys keep talking. I'm going to get you the book and I'm going to have all the information for you. This is going to be the coolest thing that I would love to share with you.
Yeah, I'm curious
Cool.
about that
That's
too.
wild.
Yeah, me
I think
too.
for smoking, at one point I was smoking a lot of cigarettes. Of course, when I drink, I do smoke cigarettes. Those two go hand in
Yeah, me
hand.
too.
So once you get rid of the drinking, there's really no desire to smoke cigarettes. Although the other day
Mhm.
I woke up and, like, I just really wanted a cigarette with my coffee, and the girl that spent the night had a pack in her purse from going out the weekend before. I'm like, all right, let's just cigarette and a coffee. But I believe there's one for nicotine abatement. I think was it Chantix, I think. And I remember looking
Chantix.
that up. Yeah, because my doctor offered it to me, but some of the side effects were worse than smoking, like crazy thoughts and like warped
Yeah.
dreams and loss of sense of self or whatnot.
I take NAC
So good.
for impulse control disorder, so that's it's actually curbed a lot of it. I'll figure out what you actually call it, but I take NAC. It's supposed to it's in like trials as far as like a light way to curb the ICD, as far as just like the racing thoughts, because you do. And elaborating on what I just said, as far as you do have control over it, you have a choice not to get in the car and drive 20 minutes and pull $500 out of your bank account and go gamble it. You have that choice. It's not easy by any means to not do it, but the further you get away from it, the first time you say no to it, it's easier to say it the second time. And I just think we just make the choice. At the end of the day, we make the choice
I
to do
did
it.
like the point that Hud's brought up, where some people are predisposed or have
Yeah, and I believe that too, 100%.
for certain addictions. Because, like, I've never been into gambling. Like, when I go to Vegas, as part of the Vegas experience, maybe I'll take 40, $50, go to a slot machine. It's happened plenty of times. I win a mini jackpot, so I put the initial investment back in my pocket, and then I just get free entertainment for a few hours. And then usually, as long as you're gambling, you get a couple drinks. So, like, it usually pays itself off, but it's part of the experience. I've never had any of the negative consequences of a gambler, like, oh, can't pay rent, or oh, can't take care of my responsibilities because all the money went into gambling, or things like golf. I go golfing with my family when I go home, so I've done it enough times to where I can hang, but I'm not good by any means. But that's one that I don't see myself getting addicted to. And Steve, you said something me before too, like my type of lifestyle, like I like the ladies, and it does get exhausting after a while. And there is an addictive component to it where you start to depersonalize them. It's just another new notch. And that's where you got to catch yourself. Like, hey, there's some really cool girls I'm running into, and I'm not even getting to know them. You know, it's starting to become a problem. So I think there is, to a degree, and we can discuss to what degree or whatever you guys believe there, for certain predispositions to certain types of addictions. For me, I got the alcoholic gene. I can look at my family. Those who drink die before they're 60. Those who don't, they live to 100. That's very clear. It's cut and dry.
Jaron, I want to hop in here. If you don't mind, if you could throw me full screen just so I can share this with everybody. This is what I was talking about, where sometimes it's like physically.
Let me figure out how to do this, because I don't think it'll put you. I thought it would put you full screen if you're talking. So let me remove all of us.
Oh, that works too. So what I was talking about is this book right here. It's called The Cure for Alcoholism, and it's by Roy Escapa, and then along with Sinclair. So it's called the Sinclair method. It involves taking naltrexone, which is a drug that blocks dopamine receptors. Now, I know that sounds like really ridiculous, because obviously you don't want to do that, because some people have experienced just not having joy in life. It's kind of like an antidepressant that works kind of like immediately. However, if you have serious addiction problems, this thing is fucking crazy, and it works. It's unbelievable how it works when it comes to any type of crazy addictions. I mean, this is you can see it's a pretty thick book, deep study that they did over years. There's a documentary and a bunch of other stuff about it. And I went through it myself. I tried it out. It works. It is like absolutely crazy. So I just wanted to talk about that, because with the neurons and everything else that you have set up in your head, some people are built differently. And sometimes having some intervention like this can really make a fucking difference. If you look it up, the Sinclair method, SINCLAIR, yep, I got that right. Sinclair method, look that up online, see some of the success stories. It will blow you away. So just putting that out there for anybody, even if it just helps one person. You guys can hop back in.
Yep, definitely. Thank you for that. Oh, that's a weird view. There we go. Oh, it reshuffled us. Okay, yeah, Steve, you're below me now. Yeah.
Hey.
It's like the Brady Bunch. That's dated, where they're all looking at each other like, oh, but fucking cameras reversed.
All I ask is that you don't fart. That's all I ask.
Oh, you're gonna get it. Oh, I had Indian food last night. You're getting it, bro. Actually, Indian food in Mexico, it was all out of me by the time I went to bed. Let's be honest.
I dropped the link to that book that he was showing in the private chat, if you want to put in the comments, Jaron.
Yeah, I'll do that.
Yeah, it's
so
free
cool.
audio book.
I'll add it to my reading list, because I've got like 20 Audible credits, cool. And I don't know, like I've already listened to everything I want to listen to, so I'll throw that on.
Let me share. I'll share with you guys in the private chat.
That's not an affiliate link, by the way. That's just a link to the book.
Yeah, I'm gonna share the TED Talk to it, because dude, this is crazy. And there's like the TED Talk and the documentary. This, dude, it changed my life. And you know why it changed my life? Because I no longer felt powerless. And I know that sounds stupid, because at that point in my life, I thought that there was no way that I could overcome drinking this much. And it was almost like a hard reset on myself, which helped me move to become sober, at least for that period of time, where I didn't enjoy alcohol anymore. I would have one drink and I was like, this is just, it
doesn't even taste good.
I don't like this.
For me, my gut gets acidic. So even that first day in Cancun, for the entire rest of the trip, I had like heartburn, and that really bothered me. That especially, you watched the stream a couple of days ago. I tell the story there, but the type of environment I was in, I had to perform physically. Let's say that multiple times. But like when you have that like acid in your gut, it was very uncomfortable, to the point where I reminded myself, yeah, this is why I normally don't drink.
I think that might be another point into why like certain addictions are more addictive, because they actually have physical consequences to the body. Like gambling doesn't really, elicit, gut problems. watching
Yeah.
TV
it's
or
it's a
anything.
high and rise. That's the whole thing. Is it takes you from one experience, and if you think you're about to lose, it gives you an intense fear, and then if you win,
Mhm.
like if you have an intense fear and then you win, it just settles itself down. If you think
Yeah.
you're about to win, it's still an adrenaline rush, and then if
Yeah.
you do win, you feel elated. If you lose, you just it can swing your
Yeah.
emotions in so many
You're
different
right.
ways.
So
Totally.
yeah, I can definitely touch on this. Gambling addiction specifically for me, before and after drinking alcohol. So on alcohol, it was like when you're doing it and you have a lot of money in your pocket, and I mean in the beginning, it's a lot like driving a car 120 miles an hour in traffic.
Is that an addiction?
Maybe, but I'm just
I
saying if
routinely
you
go
think about
100 on the U.S.
the,
It's
interstate
the
system.
adrenaline,
yeah,
right?
the
Dangerous
adrenaline,
passes,
the
yeah,
dopamine
downshift.
cranked up so
I
high.
see where he's going, and I haven't shared my own gambling issues,
Yeah,
but I know
the,
exactly where you're going. Go ahead.
yeah. So it's a lot like you're in a tunnel. Like whenever you're focused on, we'll call it like slot machines. It's very common. It's a lot like you're in a tunnel, and while you have money in the machine, your heart rate is up 105. I wear a heart rate monitor. I could go to the casino right now and I'd be running 110 rather than my normal 70. Right. And that's just purely that unadulterated, like crazy focus that you have. You have a focus on something you have no control of the outcome over, which is fucking absurd. But you come down off it, you leave the casino, right? The first, I would say probably the first 2 hours you leave the casino, you're intensely sad, you're antisocial to some degree. You're kind of just because your dopamine goes up so high, it's got to go so low to get back to equal, right? So it's not just that first 2 hours is extremely intense, and then maybe a couple hours after that, you kind of settle back in a little bit to your brain, and then you go to sleep. Okay, well, if you gambled I had episodes at a time where I was gambling for 12 hours. I mean, we're talking like this was my reality for 12 hours. So I would go to the casino like 7 p.m. and not leave till 6 or 7 a.m. And whether I left with money or not actually really didn't fucking matter. It didn't matter at all. It mattered zero. I've left with 10 in my pocket and I've left with zero. I've left -2, right? And they've both happened. I have the slips in front of me to prove it actually for taxes. But the next day is where you really actually feel it. You're grumpy, you're irritated, you're short, you've got the brain fog you're talking about from watching too many YouTube videos. Yeah, probably times that by about 100, right? Like if you sit in front of a slot machine for 10 hours, it's going to happen. Not only that, but you're probably a little bit hungover, and you probably have a little bit of nicotine poisoning from cranking back a pack of cigarettes in 4 hours. And you have like a social thing. You're antisocial. To me, that and the financial implications of being a gambling addict are not even, I can't even go into how deep. That's a 10 hour course on how bad that can get, right? But
Let's do another stream on that topic one of these days. We can dial into the specific addictions.
Yeah,
I would love to talk about that myself, because I've recently gotten deep into some of the stuff. So 100%.
And I noticed that I would finally come back to normal 3 days later. Because even the second day you're kind of erratic. Yep. Yeah. And then like that last day you're like, I feel a little off, but I'm good. I'm fine.
That's most substances. For me, it's always you get the Tuesday blues, and you know it. And as I mentioned earlier, I used to enjoy the come down because it was like, oh, I'm hungover, I can't do anything today, and it was a reason to not live my life. Now I enjoy the come down because I've crafted a life, and there's probably things during the day I'm addicted to. My morning coffee, I look forward to that. I look forward to the gym. I look forward for my morning walks. I look forward to playing guitar after this. I look forward to eating my one meal a day. So I think there's enough things where I've created enough micro addictions intentionally in my life to where after partying for a week, I kind of enjoy the come down. I went to a spa, went to a sauna, sweated out, got a massage, just really kind of gave my body some love after I trashed it for the few days prior. Did a juice cleanse, and I realized even that Monday, Tuesday, I was kind of off. And then Steve and I did a fat loss stream yesterday. Even when I'm off my diet for the weekend, usually by about Wednesday is the day where I feel like I'm just back on track. And For you gambling
Yeah,
guys, I think that's a big reason I always stayed away from it, because I always grew up in a lower middle income family. My family's actually done really well in my lifetime, so that looks very different now for people who know me or my family now. But we struggled when I was a kid, so I've always had money issues. Like I'm a minimalist, and I'm kind of addicted to not spending money. But now I'm starting to get the itch to make more money and see that gap grow between my expenses versus my income that's coming inbound to my bank account. So I can see that maybe become an addiction, but like for me, the money related things, it was always just like there's some negative weight to it. So I never leaned into that. Like I'm sure I'd love gambling the way my brain works. I'm sure I'd love blackjack for the social element. I'm sure I'd love playing poker and understanding how that works. I was good at chess when I was a kid, but gambling has never done it for me. And that's why, Huds, I'm glad you and Steve spoke on the issue because you guys have shared experiences there, but different addictions look different for different people and the way they impact their lives.
The one thing, though, that gambling does that no other addiction in the world does is it rewards you for being addicted. That's the one thing gambling does, right? You're gonna do your cocaine. You're gonna have that dopamine shot. That's the reward. No. The reward is you're a gold platinum member of this place because you spend an obscene amount of money. Now we're giving you meals. Now we're giving you hotels. Now we're giving you free money to play with. Now we're paying for your bar tab. Now you've got a $50, $100, whatever gift card to the gift shop so you can go get your smokes and your energy drinks because you know you're going to need those. Oh, and then, you've got a host now. Oh, you want a suite? We'll upgrade you. No problem. So it's not just, it's not even necessarily just the activity of putting the money in the machine and pressing the button and watching the numbers or whatever the fuck game you're playing come in front of your face. It's the fact that it's rewarded on the back end. I mean, this should be fucking illegal. This should be illegal as far as manipulation tactics are concerned.
Getting laid's kind of like that too.
Yeah.
To where like you
That's
start
how
off
they
like,
get you.
It's like video games. They know how to trigger with the certain
Oh,
lights.
you get a parking spot at the casino
yeah.
locally.
There's a lot of
You get a
money
parking
in
spot.
consulting for those
Got a
guys.
fucking
Yeah.
parking spot.
Yeah, they know what they're doing.
And that place 12 times I've got a parking spot because they give you, now you're the VIP member with a parking spot. What the fuck?
And you're
is
paying
going
for
on
it.
here?
You're still paying for it because you're throwing thousands of dollars in every time.
Oh, it's not even
So they
close.
make it look like it's free, but you're actually paying for it a ridiculous amount.
Steve, I want to piggyback on one of your points and then kick it over to Huds because I think he'll be able to address both of these. You mentioned it's the only addiction that rewards you. I'd argue to a degree that getting laid is like that too, for guys to get really into game because I know Huds is a dating coach. I do some dating coaching. I do a lot of those topics on my channel, but once you start getting it, and for me, it was always the lack of female attention. Like my parents split real young. I kind of raised my siblings and my mom was never around. And I remember there were days where like, I needed my dad there. He wasn't there, but I had my grandpa and I had my uncle. So they kind of stepped into that role for me. But like the lack of female attention, I think that was an underlying issue. So a lot of guys learn game for that. Like, okay, you want to get laid, and like really it's not even about getting to know the girl, getting laid. Like once you cross the threshold physically, it's like, okay, what's the next one? When I was a fat kid, it's the same way. As I'm eating a cookie, I'm thinking about what I'm eating later in the day. So so it starts off like that, but then you start getting good at it. And then I've done work on other areas of my life too, and these things kind of cross over to where now I'm like, I'm meeting really cool girls, and like these girls add a lot of value to my life. And you start getting to that point as you progress through the dating or the game or the hookup or whatever the hell you want to call it levels to where, like it's starting to pay dividends. Like my girls cook for me. They come over, they take care of me. And that allows me to do more of this stuff or focus more on my professional life or any other little pet projects I have going on. I have a music project that I've got going on. So by these girls coming into my life, like what started as an addiction for a need for validation, I've overcome that since. And now it's like, from this skill set or from this addiction, like I have been rewarded in the sense that girls that offer a lot of value to my life are now a part of it. Yeah,
it's really, really hard to quit something when it pays. I mean, that's the issue because and I feel that with the upside with chicks too. That was me kind of agreeing. It was like I was looking at this. This is what I'm paying taxes on this year. This is more paperwork than I did in my company this year, I feel like. And yeah, that's what makes it. It feels like, I feel like if you get into it, it's nearly impossible to completely get rid of because it's everywhere. It's just like alcohol. Like now you can download an app and put $100 on your favorite team to make $100. If you win, you're a G.
Well,
Like, you
don't forget your sign up deposit. You'll get your
100%.
back. You
Yeah.
get your 50%.
Oh, we'll give it back to you in Bitcoin too, so you don't even basically have to report it. Don't tax people. I never did that particularly, but like DraftKings, right? You got DraftKings, you got FanDuel, you got Barstool Sportsbook, you got BetMGM, you got Caesars, you got all these places that give you, and literally, I got 6 of these fucking apps on my phone. And you can go in there and put $1 bets against 11-way parlays all day long and come out with $2,000 once every 6 months and be jacked about doing it. And even though you don't even make your money back, it's just an entertainment. The entertainment value. Dude.
Did you use Bovada at all? Did you use Bovada?
I lived in Nevada for that was a big problem.
It's an app. So
Bovada, yeah. I use Bovada myself for I used that for boxing, I think, for a little while. But yeah, I've used that. Have you ever used that?
I used it for baseball for me, baseball and football.
Dude, I got the most random check on my first payout from some random place in Canada. I was like, what the hell is this thing?
I did the parlays a lot too. That was a little jump down memory lane doing the, you don't know what a parlay is. It's you've been on one team winning and one team losing, right? And if they both win, you get like a 10 times payout. And we would just throw hundreds of dollars to try that.
I'll be honest, I do this every day. I have a whole bunch lined up too. But
I was just going to say that.
But one thing that I do is what he's saying, like throwing $1 or something like that. I do low money, thrown in a bunch of different things after studying it and being like, you know what, I'm feeling this. And it's crazy. You can turn $10 into $1,000. I've done it a couple times in the past few weeks. It's pretty cool. But
yeah, they're lottery tickets,
and it takes up time. So
it does.
I was going to ask you guys, do you guys work in sales by any chance? Because a lot of former gaming addicts I know, they're usually wired the way sales guys are, like they're movers and shakers, and they still get that fix through, is it still going to come through? Am I going to get this done? Or putting in some effort, maybe it'll pay off, maybe it won't. Steve, I know you were a door knocker for the longest time before you started your company, but I'm curious about that. If certain personality types are more apt to fall into certain types of addictions, because again, this is all foreign to me. I'm loving learning it, but for me, like gambling's never really called my attention.
I think for me, it's like I put a bet in the other day for $5, right? It wasn't anything crazy. It was an 11-leg multi-sport. Like the likelihood of it hitting was near nothing, and it didn't like the first 5 minutes that it was on, so it was fine. But it was like $5 with a 19,070 something odd payout for 192,000 off of a $5 bet, and I didn't think it was going to hit. But what if it did? Right? It's like your parents going to what if it did? Like, what if that actually, I looked down tomorrow or something and I had $192,000 in my DraftKings account? That'd be sick. And the $5, I think the entertainment. So I think to conclude my thoughts on gambling, I think the entertainment value in my mind in the moment is more valuable than the $5.
Yes.
Because I'm not into enough shit. Like I'm not into anything. Like I'm not, like I was telling Joel and Huds earlier, I'm not into a team. Like I don't have a team. I don't have a football team. I don't have a basketball team. I don't have a baseball team. I don't even have players. I don't care. Like I like y'all. You're the best at what you do, right? But to drag me into that kind of, I'm going to call it a male-dominated space, to drag me into that space and make me interested in the sport, I just figure out how, like, I'll use betting on a sport as an excuse to get into the sport. That's what I used to do with a bar. We had a sports bar like literally 3 blocks from here. Before I quit drinking, I would build DraftKings lineups, like 10 or 12 or 15 of them. I'd put $100 out in every night. And I mean, that's for my income. That's not that bad, just to entertain myself. And I would go down to the bar and get a pizza and sit there and drink tall boys for 6 hours and just watch 6 different football games or 3 different football, whatever was on, right? I think it was probably 3 at the most.
My brother does that. That is fun every now and then for the social element. Like if you were to do that and you're in town, like I'd join you, but like I probably wouldn't partake.
But here's the thing. The entire thing is about just you're paying for the experience. I always think about that when it comes to gambling. Once you teeter off the ledge and all of a sudden you are betting way more than you can lose, that's when you hit a problem. But if
Yeah.
you throw,
yeah.
as you said, like $100, you're paying for that 6-hour experience. And it's fun. You're talking to people, you're enjoying food, you're doing everything else. That's what I think the teetering line is with addiction. There's one thing to have a hobby, because personally, I view sports betting to me as a hobby instead of an addiction. But you need to understand, and for you, Jaron, whiskey is a hobby, not an addiction. We need to understand where a hobby and addiction have their separation.
That's a great, actually, like a great funnel point to the whole first hour and 20 minutes of our discussion, because we can talk about how bad things are and the depth of how bad things can get, but we can also talk about the good things you can get from it if you can figure out your way, a way of being able to view it. I mean, look at the difference to me now after this conversation between an addiction and a hobby is how you perceive it.
Yeah, it's how you frame it.
It's how you frame it. Like
I think I should probably more aptly title this stream like managing addictions, because it seems like that's kind of where the topic's gone.
We never need to get rid of all of them. We all have one.
Exactly.
Like, that's the big thing.
We have here in the chat, it came in a while ago, but Ian, if you're still here, I'm finally getting around to it. I'm trying to get better at not interrupting the flow of the conversation, because I like these longer form type formats. But here's a new addiction that I think pretty much everyone has. Is Jaron, you said you define addiction as anything that gives you a dopamine boost. Do you view social media addiction as the next prevalent addiction for younger generations? Feel free to jump in, anyone. Yeah,
100%. Yeah. I'm a little on the younger side than you guys. I think I'm 28, and so I grew up with like, you know, not like from a super young age, but once I hit like middle school, MySpace was coming around. Mm-hmm. So a lot of our social connection was through Facebook. We didn't have Instagram at the time, but definitely Facebook. And yeah, I have my younger brother. He's like 20. I think he's 20 years old, but he is hooked on Instagram. I think a lot of the younger folks are too. And so like even social media is a double-edged sword. Like we're all producing content and stuff. Sometimes I felt like a bit of a drug dealer, because it's like I'm, making content on YouTube, which is an addictive platform. So Ian, to answer your question, yeah, I think it's definitely a thing that's prevalent with that younger generation and the older generation too. I think a lot of folks just all around are hooked on it, and I'm just curious to see what happens in the next like 100 years, especially with like AI's coming in, all this crazy stuff, like where life's going to be.
They're going to get lost to the digital world. They're not going to be able to separate the digital and the analog.
I've got a follow-up question to that. Would you feel the same, would you feel like a drug dealer if you were making pizzas and distributing them to people who love pizza?
Damn it, I want pizza now.
Well, yes.
No,
yes, same share. I'll take a pizza. Yeah, I've definitely had a food addiction as well, like to sugar and stuff. So I had to get out of the food industry, because in terms of like serving food and stuff, because I felt pretty bad about that. And I do some delivery gigs on the side, and yeah, it's just like, I know I'm getting food for people that are handing food over that for people that are just like addicted to it. That's like their sole purpose is to get this.
You see like obese people open the door and you're like, bro, you do not need this.
Maybe you're just an empathetic person then. Like there's nothing wrong with that either. Like you actually understand the consequences of your actions, whether they're ancillary or not. You understand, like you look at stuff deeper than most people. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. I was just clarifying that we know that social media is a problem. Everybody knows that social media is a problem to some degree. I just went on and I just did a full on. I went through all my following, that pages that I'm following on Instagram last night, actually, just to follow that up, because for some reason I was following stuff that didn't fit who I am. It was like the success pages, right? Early
success
on,
porn, or all your thoughts.
Yeah, the success porn, right? You're mentally masturbating to the idea of having a Bugatti. I don't want a fucking Bugatti. I don't want a Lamborghini. I don't care about that shit.
I like not having a car, and I love cars, but I can rent exotic cars when I travel.
I think
Yeah,
this is interesting.
Wow.
I actually, and I don't know if you saw me smirking a lot, and I'm thinking,
Yeah.
I love what you had just said in that question you posed, because you can think of certain content in social media today. You think about TikTok, it's kind of like it's selling cigarettes to children in the same way that they did back in the day, same way that Camel was selling. And we know it's bad for them, but we keep pushing it because it's just making money.
Yeah, and I think
So
the
true.
I really want to do a later talk on the business of selling success, right? The business of creating twisting the mind of, I mean, whether it's youth or I'm fucking almost 34 years old and I'm following business pages and I'm like, oh yeah, I want a $4 million house. No, I fucking don't. If I do, it's a big ass log cabin on the top of a mountain in the middle of nowhere with some cows. Like, I don't want none of that shit. So I just unfollow. I don't need to hear this. Oh, if you don't have a Paddock Felipe, you're a fucking loser. No, I'm not. Unfollow. Like
No.
that kind of shit. Like it's brainwashing. Like it forces people to believe that their life is insignificant because they don't have these things that are attached to this this facade that was created. And I'm not even saying, I'm definitely not hating on rich people. If I had the money for a Paddock, I'd buy one, right? And I don't even wear watches, but it's a status symbol. Like people are addicted to status. That's all it is. That goes back to the fucking addict thing. Like you want to be part of something, and that just seems like the best option, right? But the reality is, maybe you should read a book by Ryan Holiday. Ego is the enemy. Ironic, right?
And
Like,
there's
join
that
the
guilt
stoic.
factor too. Like I talk about RP or Crimson Capsule type topics, but a lot of guys get addicted to that stuff, the entertainment value of it. There's certain content creators out there where it's all sensationalism and people watch that stuff like it's Jerry Springer. So I try to separate myself from that quite a bit more than I did previously. But, you know, I did come through that too. There were times where I had issues in my dating life, my relationship life, or like I just had not much going on. And I would just drown myself in that type of content, which there is some value you can get out of it. But I think going back to one of the points we made earlier, there's a guilt factor. So like I noticed a lot of guys that watch my channel or when I go on like Rich's channel or larger channels, in the comments, there'll be guys that they'll say like the weirdest stuff. And you're realizing like, oh, this guy can't get laid. Like this guy's probably a virgin. He probably creeps chicks out. He probably is socially kind of off a little bit. And he sees guys like me and I make him feel guilty and they're addicted to the content. So a lot, you always say like your haters are your biggest fans. And there's some that pop up every now and then. I'm like, bro, you've watched like every video of mine. Like you can talk shit in the comments all you want, but like, thank you. You know, you're helping me out in the algorithms there by, you know, going through all my backlog of shit. But I think there's that guilt component there. Much like the guys get guilty for watching red pill content, that success porn or actual porn or any addiction, you know, you like it, you get that rush when you do it. It's an escape. It's a fantasy as it pertains to social media, or even just following thoughts and shit all day long and dropping her DMs or whatever. Like there's a slight dopamine hit there, but I think that guilt factor does come with it too. Kind of like the success porn type stuff. Like you mentioned, oh, you don't drive Bugatti, you're a fucking loser. It's like, oh, am I? Like, can I be doing better? This guy's like 10 years younger than me, and he just sold a tech company for, you know, multiple billions of dollars. Like, the fuck am I doing? And then I look at my life objectively. I'm like, no, I'm living really well. You know,
I get a random question for you guys, and one that I want to. I'm sorry if I'm going off the rails,
Go ahead.
and one that I want to pose to the chat as well. So, posing in the chat, post a 1 if you share with other people that you watch and consume red pill content, and 2 if you don't. And then I want to hear from you guys if you share with others, even if it's not just like RP content, even if it's just self-development, like do you share with others in your life that you are on a self-development journey? Do you talk about this at all?
Mm-hmm.
Good question. Yeah, no one talks about red pill topics.
And
like
I brought it up to folks and they sometimes makes them uncomfortable, or there'll be the occasional person that really like is excited about it. And that's like, I'm just like, yes, I finally found someone I can talk about this stuff with, because it's kind of lonely, because it's like, you can't talk to women about it. They're going to be like, what the hell?
You can tell by the language they use if they're RP aware or not. I met a cool guy in Cancun last week, and he just texted me now. He took like a 2-week vacation. And when he was talking, I noticed he used certain words or had certain views on things where I'm like, bro, you're like an RP guy. And I was on Business in New York about this time last year, and same thing. It was a company meeting, big table with a bunch of people, and the way a certain guy talked, and I think he saw that in me too. Or afterwards, I went out to the balcony for a smoke, and he came out. He's like, "Bro, you follow this stuff, right?" And it's like, "Oh, okay, cool." And Joel, you're right. And again, like any type of addiction, you're like, "Oh, there's that social element of it. Like we are our own little group, our own little kind of mini culture here amongst the larger group."
Yeah.
I wanted to touch on something too about the addiction and the red pill. Like I was definitely addicted to red pill content. And Jaron and I talked about this when we had our interviews. Like I was addicted to Rich Cooper's channel. I would watch it literally from sun up to sundown because it gave me like that feeling that I was doing something when I really wasn't. And then it
that's
got
a
to a
really,
point.
really interesting point.
Totally.
That's literally, I was listening back to some of the stream we did the other night. That's literally exactly what I said. I love that because that's what it is. You feel good listening to it, but you're not actually doing anything.
Yeah, it's a mental masturbation for sure. 100%.
Yeah.
And that's why I mean I went through and I think I deleted like 80 accounts, ones that I could basically delete without Instagram stopping me, because they tell you to not do as many. But
and I've had to
yeah,
separate too from somebody like Jaron's channel. Like I feel that guilt sometimes because you guys, all three of you, are pretty established in your careers, right? I would imagine.
For the most part, I'm hard on myself, so I have the like, oh, you like I could be a CMO right now if I wanted to, but I stay at like senior middle level manager type roles when I do the corporate type contracts, or I've been doing consulting the last few years, but I do have that thought like, hey, you could be like the president of a company right now if you really applied yourself. But it's not like I'm not working. There's just other interests I have in my life, and I choose to give energy and attention to those too.
That's actually really, really interesting. I think because I own a business and I know there's things I could do to do better and have more clients and do that. And it wouldn't really, honestly, it wouldn't be that hard. And I have lots and lots of moments where I do push really hard. And then I have other moments where I just take my foot completely off the gas pedal and don't even fucking answer my phone for 2 days. So the interesting point is we all want to be successful, right? Because that's an improvement in status for us, just in general, right? Just I feel better. The more successful you are, technically, the better you feel. But we also, in a way, are uncomfortable with the idea of being successful because it presents a level of responsibility that we're not familiar with yet.
You nailed it. I'm dealing with that right now. Like I really could level up, pretty quick if I wanted to, but like, do I want to do that? Yeah. Do I want to have my entire day dictated by someone else? And I wake up and look at the agenda that a VA put together. I'm like, no time for myself to do other things. Those thoughts have gone through my head.
People having to count on you. You have to be up at 7:30 in the morning because you have to be available for 8 people. No, I don't want to do that. Okay, well, that's going to present a restriction on my business. Yes, I would love to have the money to go buy a Bugatti and get a house if I wanted, right? That's I wasn't saying that you don't go get that money if that's what you want. If that's what is your driving force. But when it comes down to it, I would rather get up and put sweatpants on and meander around, take a shower longer than 5 minutes, check my emails, kind of do stuff, kind of waddle. I call it waddling, kind of waddle into my day if I want to do that, or not do shit at all if I really want to do that, right? And you can't do that when you're responsible for other people. So I feel like we kind of live in that space where we can use addictions to limit us and use them as an excuse for not leveling up, instead of just saying, I'm not really into the idea of running a $10 million business. I'm doing 2. I'm fine. I'm good. Right. And that to the success porn industry is like, whoa, what?
You're a loser.
You don't want to blow your business up to 9 figures. I work in a business where the average transaction is like $250 per transaction, and we do between 2 and 5 a day. I think that I'm doing okay, but just exercising my brain to the thought that I would have to do like 30,000 or some shit transactions a year to even remotely come close to that atrocious level of fucking frequency. It exhausts me. So yeah, we'll do a few hundred. I would say a few hundred. We probably do close to 1,200 transactions a year. That's fucking plenty. That is way more than plenty for me. I am good. I like playing golf and I'm not addicted to it. So maybe if you looked at, if we go full circle back to the golf talk that we were having earlier, it's like maybe golf is affecting that. Like maybe video games are affecting that, but maybe you just accept the consequences of that as part of the story that you're creating. You don't have to be fucking Alex Hormozy or Elon Musk, who work. I mean, I don't think Alex Hormozy works 15 hours a day, but you don't have to be Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos or Bill Gates or whoever the fuck you compare yourself to. You don't have to be that guy.
Do you want,
Or
because to
even
get
like
to that
Andrew
level,
Tate, like
Yeah.
he's
Yeah.
like on another level too.
that level requires a
Yeah.
certain lifestyle. So what do you want your lifestyle to look like? Like
It
I
requires
like,
no lifestyle. That's the point.
yeah, I'm so wired that I like a chill environment. I like a really
Yeah.
just tranquil, peaceful type
Absolutely.
lifestyle. Like I'm naturally wired where I could live a Tate like type lifestyle, but to be honest, I'd probably burn out pretty quick. I'd probably go
Oh,
too
100%.
hard, too fast. And I've got people in my family, same thing I've mentioned, like second cousins, went to Miami, real successful in whatever they were doing, and dead at 35 because they just went a little too hard. And
Yeah.
what is it? What is it like my parents called it? He lives a fast lifestyle. I was like, I'm already a million miles an hour here. I want my lifestyle to be kind of more
Yeah,
low
so
key.
on that
And the
too
thing
is like, go ahead.
I was just gonna say it. The other thing is that it doesn't fulfill you. It like everyone that
Yeah.
reaches success eventually says like, yeah, I wish I would have spent more time
Money
with my
isn't
family,
everything.
or when they're on their deathbed, they're like,
Yeah.
there's like a quote. It's like the last thing
Yeah.
anyone thinks on their deathbed is, I wish I would have spent more time on my business.
Yeah.
And it's like, even hearing you guys talk about it, it's like you three are saying how you think you could be doing better, right? And from my
Right.
perspective, I'm like, holy shit, I should be busting to get like these guys. So that just says that it never ends, that the climb never ends. There's always someone that's going to be out hustling you, outworking you. And it's just like at some point, I'm working on this right now. I'm trying to work on this. It's just being content and just being like, my life's good.
Yeah, but you don't believe that. That's the problem. Is when you actually like when you get to that point, you don't think anything because you're just enjoying your life. You're actually in the moment. Like
Right.
I think I have, and this is why the success porn had to go. I do pretty well for myself, right? I do okay, and that has no like. But I don't necessarily need to share it. I don't need to go get a fancy car. I don't need a fancy apartment. I don't care. Like none of that shit is valuable to me whatsoever. What I want to do and wake up every single day and understand who I am and be okay with the fact that I am not a perfect human being in any way, shape, or form. I have the addictions. Cool. Okay. Well, I'm managing them well. Great. Are they affecting anybody other than me? Absolutely not. I don't think. I mean, if they are, come forward, please. Right? Like, so it's gotten to a point where, yes, I was addicted to alcohol for a while. Cool. Okay. We're not doing that for now. We're just leaving it, not the season for it. Right? Cool. Weed. I got other responsibilities. I don't need to be doing that. Fine. Gambling, I'll go every once in a while. I'll go to the casino every once in a while and fucking tie one on. Cool. Okay, well, I just have to understand that I'm probably going to lose 10 grand this year. Great. Now that we're off on that, right? It's almost pure acceptance. You just have to be completely, and you just have to be 100% accepting of who you are. And like, because these things become like almost personality traits, right? And like, none of us here are above each other in any way, shape, or form. Maybe one person makes more money than the other, or somebody's like got a little bit more inner peace, but that's what we're ultimately going for. I would look for the most peaceful person I possibly could and try to be like that guy. Because that guy's got it figured out at the end of the day. It doesn't matter how much money he makes because he's just being a human being. It's what we were put here for. We were just here to experience shit.
Like a Tibetan monk. An interesting point you made is in terms of being hard on yourself. I think most guys, not even just here on this panel, but most guys in general, we're pretty hard on ourselves, at least to some degree, if we're being honest. And sometimes I ask the question, am I being too hard on myself or not hard enough? And you kind of waver. But I think having a degree of that is good. So, for example, recently I've mentioned on my channel, I dropped my last corporate client in about a month ago now. That was kind of scary because I got to the point like, okay, I'm making more money on my side projects than I was the corporate gig. And I wasn't spending enough time on my side projects. So I'd rather, and they're more interesting to me. So I'd rather do this. I'm now at that point. Well, turns out February is a very nice month because I got paid on those corporate contracts. My side projects did well. March has been pretty lean. April will look better. So So it's kind and I did feel guilty for going to Miami and then going to EDC and then going to Cancun, but I think I kind of needed that reset because I got to a point where I'm starting to enter a new chapter of my life, but I'm kind of back and forth there. Like, hey, you piece of shit, you did 3 parties 3 weeks in a row, and it kind of cost me more money. Like, I live on a minimalist budget down here, so each one of those trips costs more than what my total monthly expenses are if I'm just working every day. But I think it's kind of nice having that feature built in too, because for me, it's like, okay, maybe I don't want the Bugatti, maybe I don't want a private jet, I don't want that responsibility, but I don't want to go below baseline. So I got to a certain point this month, like February was up here, March was a little down here. So overall, I'm still trending positive if I look at it at a longer term, but there's still that part of me is like, all right, time to get on it. Like you gotta get, not only replace your cash flow you lost, but you need to take it to the next level, and you need to make this a serious thing for at least the next 90 days, at which point, I usually hit my goals faster than I set out to do them. Something, I'll put stuff that I did years ago will all of a sudden open a door for me or pay off. Or I've made some business contacts when I was in Cancun, despite all the partying, we had some good conversations too. And those people are starting to reach out now. They're getting home, getting back in the swing of things. So it could possibly be advantageous. And that's kind of how my life works. But I need to make sure that, like, okay, I worked really hard to get to this level. I cannot fall below it. And I'm the same way in the gym. Like, I'll eat a little bit around the holidays, but when I start feeling pudgy or like a bit of my tummy starts rolling over the top of my jeans, I'm like, all right, it's time to cut. Like, it's unacceptable for me even to start sliding one level back. And I think that's to a degree. And guys, if you want this to be a discussion piece, feel free to jump in. But I think it's a good thing to a degree. But like the addiction topic, you can overdo it. Like, we've all known those guys that are just work all the time. And like my second cousin's example, he died before he was my age, but he was extremely successful, and he was wired a lot like me. But as my family says, he lived a lifestyle that was a little too fast, and he couldn't keep up, and he paid the consequence there. So I'd be curious to know what you guys' take is on that.
Yeah, well, I mean, workaholism is definitely a thing. It's a program I've spent time in, learning how to unwind from that fast lifestyle. And that's the balance, I think, of being a guy, is learning how to have that like grace. Like Steve, you've been talking about a lot about that, just accepting that you're a human being and you're going to mess up and do stupid stuff. And at the same time, like getting back on your ass and working hard and setting those long-term goals and sticking them out. And I think it's just being kind to yourself through the process, I think, is the goal. And it's definitely tough, like especially in the whole like manosphere context, because you don't hear a lot about like it's okay to feel anything, right? It's like if you say the word feel, it's like it's you're instantly cut down. So that's why I appreciate like you guys talking and stuff and being able to talk with you guys. And it is really balancing feelings and action as well. So that's kind of my take on it.
It's not that you're not feeling, like, you're a fucking human being. You're gonna feel feelings. Like, you're gonna feel feelings. It's just
no, dude, you're blue pill. You're blue pill.
Whatever.
Yeah, you're a beta simp cuck douche.
You're fucking yellow pill. I don't know. Fuck off.
Yeah. You like Asians, or at least you went through a phase.
Yeah, that's true. I do.
Do you call it yellow pill?
For a bit, yeah.
I call it yellow pill. Yeah. Nice. I don't know what that means.
You're looking the yellow pill.
Yeah.
Might be going too far there.
No, I get a little yellow in the winter. You're not.
No, but I do have a good one.
There you go.
I want the Asian filter.
I want to share.
They have the Mexico filter. Everyone here bitches about that. Like, how come whenever Hollywood films show Mexico, it's always like that yellow filter? Like, I'm looking outside right now, it looks just like California. It's like blue skies.
Dude, your feelings are a barometer for where you're supposed to go, because your feelings are just a reflection of your gut, your intuition, like how you react to something. Think about, like, when you get angry about something that isn't happening to you, that's telling you something. So it's not that
it's a call to action. It's like an indicator on your dashboard of your car. Like, it could be serious.
What's going on that's right.
Maybe you're going to drop your transmission. Usually it's just a sensor, but it's like, hey, pay attention.
Pay attention. Yeah, pay attention to what you're doing. So, I mean, there's nobody rolls around throughout their life being completely cold unless they're a sociopath or they're medically diagnosed with some, like, I think that's the right condition, right? And it's not wrong to even express those feelings, but doing it in a manner that retains your, we'll call it frame. I hate the fucking word frame, but retains your frame, retains the respect that people do, that people have for you. Like, that's what one way to do it. That's why I practice stoicism so much. It's that you know how to use your emotions to benefit you the most. I mean, even when you're sad, there's good things that come out of it, because now you know what you can't tolerate in that direction, right? Or angry or disappointed or whatever. It's all just different. It's just legs off of this thing we're trying to, this image this expectation we have of ourselves. Like, the first time I ever blew $1,000 in a casino, I always wanted to be rich. So I was disappointed that I blew the G, right? Because I had this goal over here. I wasn't disappointed. I had a good time, right? But there was a sense of remorse in that. Like, because I was carrying at 20, I think the first time I ever blew G in a casino was like 24. I was carrying an unrealistic expectation for myself, and somehow that disappointed me. Wow, that's par for the course. Makes sense. Makes sense. The sense that you would be disappointed. I always tell my girl that you should come when you're asking me to do something, come at me with zero expectations, because you don't know what's going to come out of my mouth. I do the same thing for her if she has something going on. I don't expect anything necessarily, unless it's like, hey, you remember that thing you expected, right? Unless it's obvious. I just let her speak and then respond as hopefully positively as I can. Not always, obviously, but yeah. So that's my thought, is like, you're allowed to have emotions as a man. That's why we're sitting here. We all feel something about this subject. That's why we're taking 3 hours or 2 hours or whatever it is out of our day to address it. And hopefully people get value out of it, and they see that they're not alone, number one. I thought I was the only guy that was addicted to nicotine, alcohol, salt, and gambling. And guess what?
We're all in the same tribe.
I'm starting a membership community. High blood pressure. HPP community, right?
Addicts.
Holy fuck.
Hey, Jaron, can you throw up that chat that was sent through?
Yeah, I was waiting for a lull in the conversation. So in sales, the saying is people make decisions emotionally rather than rationally, and then justify them. And then the next one, or that could be a quote from Rich, no idea which one. Yeah, now you got me second guessing. Yeah,
but
like
what's interesting about this, and what I wanted to point out, is because this is the gambler's fallacy right there. They will be ready to go ahead and put $500 on red, and then it turns up black, and they'll go through those motions, and then at the end of it all, they're like, it is what it is. Settle down. That's the entire thing. We make decisions emotionally, and then afterwards we justify our bad decisions in that way. I thought that was really interesting, because I think that we do that a lot with addictions, not just with gambling, but with all addictions. Is that, okay, well, I've been sober for 6 months. I'm going to go ahead and just grab a 6-pack on the way home. It's been such a stressful day. And then, boom, you fall into a bender, and you're drinking every day again. It's exactly what it is.
Yeah. Yeah, you almost get that feeling of newness in the addiction when you don't do it for a while. Like, I go a few months without going to a casino, I'm pumped. I'm so excited to go. Until I get there, then I'm like, oh, it smells like cigarettes in here. Wow, there's lots of old ladies wheeling themselves around with walkers. This is probably not the environment for a man of my stature to be in.
Why do all these people have oxygen tanks as they roll around to the different
That's what I was thinking. Yeah, they all have oxygen tanks. They're using their social security checks.
They have walkers.
They're like the rascals from Wally.
Chain smoking cigarettes.
You can't go on the first because there's too many people with their fucking welfare checks, right? And and then that was actually an after I quit drinking realization, because when you're drinking, you don't give a fuck. You're just rolling around trying to figure it out, right? But afterwards, I was having like a Heineken Zero, sitting at a slot machine, smoking a cigarette, and I looked around and I was like, I'm not like anybody else in this place.
Yeah, I don't want to be a part of this crowd.
No, like I didn't. It just did, and that's
one of the things that's interesting. I don't mean to cut you off, but that's one of the things that's interesting about gambling and being at casinos is that's one of the few times that I think that you can fuel your addiction. And if you actually come to realization and you look around and you realize, I don't belong here. You know what I mean? Like when you're at a bar, like a sports bar or something, like with friends watching a game,
Yeah.
a lot of people, like, they kind of look similar. You know, no matter what you're doing, it's always kind of looking similar. But then when you reach a certain level in your life and you're sitting there at the casino, you look around and you realize, what the fuck am I doing with my life?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you notice
Yeah.
it's very dependent on the region you are in the country, whether you're in like Vegas or you're in like where I live in Kansas. It's very dependent on where you are in the country. It's very dependent on the size of the casino. It's very dependent on how expensive the hotel rooms are. That's another one too, because within a couple hours of the house, we've got like a Hard Rock. We've got a bunch of Indian casinos, and there's a lot of there's a lot of normal people there. But like you go to the local one, and it's just a bunch of fucking chain smoking, not so
And it's an
good
easily
thing.
accessible addiction. We were talking yesterday
Yeah.
on the Fat to Fit stream where, you know, food's in front of your face and they promote it, or alcohol, same thing. Like they promote alcohol use. I get offers all the time. I'm a digital marketer, so I sign up for like all sorts of email subscriptions. I get offers all the time for like $29 Allegiant flights to Vegas and like $140 a night hotel rooms, you know, pretty decent casinos. And I can see that, they make it easy to get there because they know that they're not stupid people. They're going to make a return on that investment, even if it's a loss leader. Like with fuel the way it is, there's no way they're making money on a $29 flight from Pasco, Washington to Las Vegas.
No.
But it's loaded with people, and they all have that energy. Like, yeah, we're going to go, and they're going to drop some money. That's why you go to Vegas.
Yeah, they did a study on it actually. They say that if the average person brings let's say the average person brings $1,000 to the casino, the likelihood is you're going to lose 200 on average, right? So they can give you $200 in perks and benefits to show up, to make it easier for you to lose more. So like for me, because my average at one particular casino, we'll call it $1,000 just for the sake of math, because I was going in there and I was technically rolling $5,000 to $10,000 through machines on a weekly basis, technically, right? Because that's cumulative. It's not, you're not just rolling $5,000 through, but it's cumulative. So they were willing to give me $1,200, roughly $1,200 to $1,500, or $1,000 to $1,200 worth of perks and benefits. There's no $1,000 hotel room at this place. There's not $1,000 worth of food. There's not $1,000 worth of alcohol or $1,000 worth of anything that I am going to consume. So they will treat me, or somebody like me, or somebody that bets at the level that I did, they will treat somebody like me like they will treat somebody that is doing 20,000. Because at that point,
like a bottle service client, like you get VIP treatment.
It's just marketing. That's all it is. They assume that 20% you're going to lose 20, or you're going to lose a certain amount. So they're going to take a percentage of that and they're going to put it into bringing you back, so you lose more. And that's why that's how you gather up $300, $500 in free play. That's how you gather up hotel suites. I had rounds of golf and shuttle service, and they would have flown me from where I live to Oklahoma City to go do that.
So I got a question for everybody here. When it comes to like breaking addictions like this, what's the best way to do so? I know we were talking about good, bad addictions, everything else. What's the best way? Like, let's say you got the perks, you're getting the stuff. I get to go to Vegas. Hey, honey, you want to go to Vegas?
Yeah.
So what do you do to break away from some of these bad habits? What's the best way? And Joel, I want to come to you first.
Sure. Yeah. Well, what I like to tell people on my channel, and even through some of my coaching and stuff, is to take it slow and steady. So there's a couple ways. You can do the cold turkey, which I think most people try to do, but that fucking hurts. It's traumatic. It hits every part of the soul. And you're just like, oh, fuck this. Like, I'd rather just go back to using. So I really suggest doing slow and steady. So really just kind of slowly weaning off the substance or the behavior or whatever it is. Because that way it's like you almost get good at not using. It becomes like a habit, like a skill. And so like I say, like let's say you're at rock bottom, right? Like you're gambling like every night, take an hour off, go right back to what you're doing and give yourself that permission. And then keep doing that like every single day. Eventually you'll get to a point where you can do that and it's easy. And then just like what you guys were talking about earlier about getting back into discipline, then you're like, okay, I got to step it up a bit. So then go to like 2 hours without, and just kind of keep building up. And what I found is that after I do that enough times, I get to a point where I'm just like, one, I'm living more sober than I am using the addiction or whatever. And then using the addiction starts to feel uncomfortable. Like it's like, ooh, this like hurts. Like, and then from there, that's when it actually gets tough, because it's like, okay, now I have to make the decision. Is this something I want to continue doing, or try to mitigate, or just get rid of completely? So I'm in that right now personally with the media and stuff. Like I use media less than I do use it. And then when I get those like 5-day breaks or whatever, I start to crave it again. And it's like, okay, now it's time to step it up a bit. I think personally, like I'm going to start going for like months off instead of just like a couple weeks. And I think that's going to be the next push. But that's really what I tell people, is to go slow and steady. It wins the race. Yeah. It might take a little longer in the grand scheme of things, but in reality it doesn't, because then a lot of times what people do with the cold turkey is they are just doing cold turkey for like years and years. They're like, okay, this is the day I'm finally going to quit. And I swear it off forever. A week later, they're back on it. So it's like, that's kind of my thoughts on it.
Or they do it as like a pride thing too. They tell people, I'm done. Okay, now I get the dopamine boost of telling everybody that I'm done, and then give them a couple days, and then all of a sudden they're doing it again. It's like, it just didn't work this time. There's too much going on in my life.
For sure.
I use for drinking. I was on the phone with my dad, and he's a highly accomplished guy, and I said, Dad, this is rough. Like, I don't know how to quit doing this. And he said, just stop. And he said, I started doing, he said he went a little hard over Christmas or whatever with the family. And then he said, I quit drinking for a year on January 1st. Why don't you just join me? And I was like, fuck, how am I going to tell my dad no? Right. And then I took about 10 seconds and I said, done. And I said, I'll start tomorrow, because I had a fucking half a gallon of booze that I was not going to completely go through, but I wanted to see if I couldn't fucking figure this out. Right. And then I realized what I did was, I think, to answer the question, what I did was I tied quitting to somebody that I refused under any circumstances to lie to. And if
accountability,
I like that.
If he lost respect for me, that would devastate me. So the few times that I've thought about drinking, I mean, it's been like 3 or 4 times this whole time where I've been like, man, it'd be really nice to have a drink right now just for the experience, blah, blah, blah. It was like, you can have a non-alcoholic beer. That's the mitigation. That's the part of the mitigation. It's like, you can have the taste of the alcohol. You can smoke the cigarette. He didn't say don't smoke cigarettes. He didn't say don't smoke weed. He just said no drinking for 365 days, period. And for those few times, it was like, okay, well, I'll go to the Scar Bar and have a drink or watch a game or something like that, just to feel normal. But that was it. It was under no circumstances whatsoever would I ever lie to this person, nor would I ever abandon them in something that they were joining me in.
I think that's one thing why AA and other things like that are very important, is because it gives you a sense of community and accountability. As Jaron was saying, accountability is key. So don't think that you have to break addictions or change habits alone. There's plenty of people out there. I know Jaron talked about it the last time I was on the stream. Hey, we're your content creators. Reach out to us. Talk to us. We're going to answer. We're going to help out. If you need somebody to just help you,
we're still small.
journey,
we're not Joe Rogan yet, so reach out.
Yeah.
Even though, like, that's right. I didn't know that. What are you talking about? But even in that instance, like, the point of these is to make an impact anyways. So at that point, if you're running, I mean, obviously it's Joe Rogan and that type of podcaster is such an outlier that if somebody were to, if I were to get there, if we were to get that big, I guess I would want to have a full-time team taking care of just people who called in. That would be it. I would have a full staff, maybe 5 people, that their whole job was to answer emails and phone calls at no charge.
You would
Just-
have to, because there'd be
you would
so
have-
many
you
people
would-
reaching it.
Yeah, and I mean, if you're covering stuff, so I'm sure Joe Rogan doesn't have to do that shit because he's covering all kinds of crazy topics, you know, aliens and weed and just talking about cool shit. But like something with the severity and the seriousness like this, I think it would be almost a duty to do that. Like if people are tuning into your shit like that and you're talking about something this serious that could either, I mean, this is life or death at the end of the day, I would feel the responsibility of staffing $250,000 worth of people to answer the phone and like mitigate the issues. Counselors probably.
Mm-hmm. Or get a fulfillment partner and then refer them on over to them.
Yeah, you know, or subcontract it, of course.
Yeah, right. I'm not there yet, but I'm looking at doing that. I'm starting to get fulfillment partners in place for, you know, as the channel scales, as it gets more reach and whatnot. Because I always kind of think ahead of the curve. So like, all right, I'm doing this now, but it's not always going to look like this. There will be a point where I need this infrastructure in place. And again, normally when I'm not in social mode, I'm a very structured person. So, you know, that's what I spend most of my days doing now, trying to set the framework for what my life a year, 2 years, 3 years in the future might look like.
What does fulfillment look like, or what does that mean? Like getting fulfillment?
So for example, there's a marketing agency I came on board with recently in an advisory role. And so they'd be my fulfillment partner. So they're saying, hey, you know, talk to your audience, talk to your people, talk to people in your network, see what it is they need. So we're still really early. We're gauging the market. But then I come back with ideas saying like, hey, a lot of people are talking about this. So there's a need here. So let's put an offer together. I don't want to fulfill the offer. In the last couple of years, I've been doing corporate consulting to where people bring me on board on a retainer. A lot of times it's just to have accessibility to you. And it gets to the point where every now and then something comes up. You're like, well, shit, now I have to do this like 3-day long project with this team. That's, you know, just to make sure I make sure they feel like they're getting their values worth from my retainer. So in this case, it'd be like, hey, here's stuff that people have paid. Here's what people have paid me in the past. And here's, because a lot of times you see recurring themes like HUDs. I'm sure you probably know with your coaching clients, you see a lot of recurring themes, and then kind of the process kind of starts to look the same. So fulfillment is like, all right, you're going to hire me to do a job. I don't want to do it personally because that's not scalable for me. Then I'll kick it to someone else, get a referral fee, get a percentage of the contract on the renewal, get a flat fee for again, that's the referral fee or affiliate fee. So that's the infrastructure I'm starting to put in place. I like to do this mental activity sometimes too. Like, a lot of times we're really hard on ourselves, and I'll say, pretend like you will be wildly successful. Wildly successful beyond your craziest dreams. What does that look like? What would you need to get to that point? And then scale it back a bit. Like, okay, here's where I'm at now. Here's where I'm going. What do I need to put in order to potentially get to that point?
Okay.
Infrastructure.
That's cool.
Infrastructure.
Yeah.
Structure in general.
Great way
Structure in
to
general
earn
helps.
income.
Yeah, structure in
Just
general
burn
helps you
people
with
out.
the well, yeah, because eventually, like my channel is growing. It's slower than I'd like, but it's growing steadily. So eventually, it will get there. So I'll need stuff to sell. I hate to say it, guys. I am a sellout. I'm not doing any more corporate stuff, so I got to make money somehow. You know, got to pay the bills, and I'm looking forward to the process. Like HUDs, I see have a cool studio already, but getting the studio built up and upgrading the mic and upgrading the camera, and as Steve mentioned, get some VAs on staff, get some salespeople on staff. I spent a couple hours following up on old sales leads from people that have followed me from the various channels I've been on for my group memberships or for any other stuff I sell. And it looks like I have one about ready to come through, but I got to get in that habit. At this point, I'm doing everything myself. Well, eventually, it's tough too, coming from the corporate consulting world, because you get paid a lot of money just to tell big companies exactly what to do. And then you don't do it. Like, you just put a plan in place and then they check in with you. Well, now, like, I got to send the emails. I got to send the DMs. I got to follow up with every new subscriber. I got to reach out to people directly. I got to get on phone calls. So eventually, like Steve was saying, if this concept were to scale into like a Joe Rogan type thing, which would be my definition of wild success, what does that look like? What are the things I have to start doing now to even set the foundation to potentially get to that point? And as we discussed earlier, maybe I don't want to be that big, but what are the things that the successful people do, the little things in the initial stages that need to be done to set a framework or a foundation to give me the opportunity or potential, if I choose to do so, to scale to that point, if that makes sense?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's a great mindset to, I mean, going back to the addiction, to quit addiction. It's like, what would somebody who's successful in whatever field or in sobriety do that I'm not doing? I've thought about that with this channel too. I think it's helped me stay off the substances, because there's been times where I've wanted to go, have a fun night or something. And it's like, well, if I start using again, this channel is pretty much a joke, or at least it's run its course. So I think that's a great
That's your
way
accountability
to
is
think
what
of
it
it.
is. Your
Well, I
channel
noticed
is what my dad
coming
is
back
to
to
me.
accountability.
your name is your accountability. And I came to that too when I started my channel. People are like, oh, are you going to do anonymous? I'm like, you know what? And I've got a unique name. I'm not hard to find. So you know what? I think I'm going to put my name out there, because that requires me to be honest. And I've always, in a former life, I fancied myself an academic and intellectual. I know that can get annoying for people, but like those processes are still there. I still think about crazy shit all day long. And I try to take those wild thoughts and put them in buckets and see if it fits into other parts of my life or other parts of the paradigm or the way I view the world. So if I want to be honest, and that's who I really am, then I got to put my name in front of everything I say, which means I really have to think. Or like I say a lot of times, I'm not an expert on the gambling thing. You guys, it's interesting, but as an outsider looking in and getting little nits of information to where I can relate. Okay, here's a follow-up question. Okay, what does this look like? And I'm learning just as much as I'm trying to put value out there too, and having these conversations. So that's why I chose to hey, use your real name. And Joel, much like you, Sobriety University, kind of holds you accountable. Or I say with my diet all the time, even I did a 3-hour fat to fit stream yesterday. Well, I can't be 100 pounds overweight calling guys on the internet fat. I just can't do that.
That was
That's
a hilarious thumbnail, by the way.
Yeah,
Dude.
yeah, but yeah, it's not performing well
Okay.
click through rate wise, but I got to kick it out thumbnail.
Probably triggering.
No, but that's a great point. It's the same way that if you're parading yourself as a dating coach and you don't get laid, then what are you? You're just a
Or have a
keyboard
great
warrior
relationship.
who's
I mean, at the end of
parroting.
the day, right? If you
What's
don't have
that?
if you don't have a great relationship with your significant other, then you kind of are a hypocrite.
Exactly. You don't know what the fuck you're talking about.
It's like a fat person selling a diet program. Get out of my face.
Right. It's the biggest thing that bothers me. And it's with everything. And I like the fact that we're all very honest and open with everything that we've experienced in the past when it comes to addiction or any other type of struggles. And we're able to speak rawly about it and what our journey has looked like.
Yeah.
At least
I
it's
mean,
just such a great conversation.
it is. It's really easy to, even highlight reel in a negative way. It's really easy to give people the highlight reel when they don't understand, right? It's really easy but when you're talking to a few other people and I think what this says to me is it's so much more common than we give it credit for. Even we're not special by any means. There's in no way, shape, or form. And bringing light to that in a world where the positive highlight reel is all anybody ever sees is actually really refreshing. And I was watching a video yesterday about a guy, Alex Ramosi. He said, "You're not out there building a brand when you're acting like everybody else. You are unique in your way. Nobody else, they can't copy you." Right. And that's why he does so well, because nobody ever sees a dude worth $100 million wearing Crocs and tube socks. It doesn't exist except for him.
I interviewed with him years ago when gymlaunchsecrets.com was still a startup. Because I think were they in Texas at the time? I don't remember where I was, but the big part of that brand was the mustache. All of their their male employees had the mustache, and the female employees would put a little mustache on. And he's really good at marketing too. So that brand blew up really quickly. And then you started seeing chicks on Instagram with little mustaches, and I think that all came from him. That was his brand at one point. He's got the beard now,
but
I'm reading this book right now.
$100 million offers was great. Yeah.
Yep. Yep.
I have it on my Kindle next to me. But he said that. He said being unique, like that's the only way. Like being yourself is the only way that you're going to build your brand. Otherwise, you're just a copycat of every other motherfucker on the internet. And when I heard that, the way that he said it was like, whoa. It was kind of like it took me back for a second because I'm like, what percentage of things that I do, that I say or do on here, in my real life, whatever, is just a reflection of what other people are or what they do, because it seems like it works. When the reality is, my personality is not going to work. Like if I talked like Jaron, people would look at me and be like, "All right, redneck, chill the fuck out." You know what I mean? Like, relax, okay, dude, we get it. Let's talk about cars, or some shit like that. And like if I tried to act like it, like you, Joel or Huds, I would be laughed out of the room. I'm not a dating coach. Like I don't have a sobriety university by any means.
You did quite well with the girls back in the day.
Oh, and I'm not even talking.
Oh,
Yeah,
you were always pulling.
I'm definitely great in that regard, right? As far as charm and intellect and the ability to pull. That's definitely not an issue. It's more just like the micro personality traits that leak through the paint that leaks through the canvas. It's like we can all have similar belief systems. We all do, or we wouldn't be sitting here talking to each other in a way, right? Our foundation is the same, but all the stuff that makes us different is all the stuff that you like, the perspective shifts in the conversation.
Bringing that back to the addiction topic, we touched on this yesterday on the Fat to Fit podcast. In terms of there's an element of identity there, and I alluded to this earlier in terms of when I was a kid. Like my cousin was the cool guy at the high school that I eventually ended up going to a decade later. Drove the Camaro, big jacked football star, has classically just good looking guy, good features, like genetically gifted, not the smartest guy in the world, but everyone fucking liked him. And all the cool kids chewed. They all chewed Copenhagen. And for me, once I got to the point where I started forming my own identity, like I don't really like chew. It scratches up my throat. It makes my cheeks all raw. Like I haven't chewed in years, but I've got the scar tissue coming in from my chew spots. But at the time, really, I preferred cigars at the time, but there weren't a lot of cigar smoking. And then same thing with the gambling thing. Like when Texas Hold'em was huge, I wasn't really a huge fan of Texas Hold'em. I just liked the guys that played Texas Hold'em that invited me to these like all night poker parties. And I enjoyed that social environment. So my question would be, to what degree does identity play into an addiction too? It's like, hey, you know what? Like, I really don't like when Cancun that first day is like, I don't really like drinking, but my brother's Mr. Marine and he's really against any sort of drug use because all drugs are bad for him. But he throws them back. Like he can throw those whiskeys back. So every time he went to the bar, he just brought me a drink, not realizing that I normally don't drink. And I've always been able to hang with my family, but I just can't anymore. So I had that question too. Like, I don't even like the fourth whiskey in. It's like, I'm not even enjoying this. And it's a resort. So it's like bottom shelf whiskey, which makes it even worse. And it's hot outside and sometimes the ice is gone. So it's like, why am I even doing this? And the thought came up. It's like, oh, because I'm surrounding myself with people that are doing this. And to them, that is the identity that they see in me. Whereas usually I'm more just like a microdose shrooms, smoke a mild spliff and play guitar type guy. But in that environment, I'm not that person to these people.
Identity wise, go ahead, Joel. So I've got like 80% of what I'm thinking dialed in.
Cool. Yeah. I mean, that was like I think that identity is like one of the roots of addiction. Like when I was in high school and doing sports and stuff, nobody would smoke weed that was good at sports. And so drink on the regular. So the thought of doing that was like, yeah, no way, I'm not going to do that because I wanted to fit in. And when I got into college, I went to I'm in Madison, Wisconsin. So I went to the UW Madison, and all these like smart people are smoking weed, doing Molly, doing mushrooms, doing acid. They're passing their classes. They're going into like biomed stuff. And I'm just like, okay, so if I start using these substances too, that means I'm really smart. So I like ego plays a huge part about it, and like trying to create this identity for myself, and then using substances and other people's experiences to either validate that or just devalue that. And so I think like once I started to figure out a little bit who I was as a human being, that stopped becoming as big of an issue. And I think that's hard when you're young, because when kids are young, all they want to do is fit in. They have most anyway. There's a lot that obviously do, but a lot don't know who they are, don't know what they're about and stuff. And so once I started getting a little more in touch with who I was like, okay, I'm like Jared. Like, I like to just chill out, play some music. I don't like going to the bars and the clubs. Like, I hate that, honestly. But I did that all the time in college because that's what everyone else was doing. So yeah, identity played a huge role in it for sure.
Yeah, I would actually argue that our parents taught us that. I think our parents taught us that because that's where keeping up with the Joneses came in. Everybody was middle class. Everybody bought the same Honda. Everybody bought the same minivan. Everybody wore the same clothes. Dad was always in a polo and jean shorts and fucking tube socks, like the 90s, right? Like, everybody was the same. You could look at, and I'm just going to say white America because it's just the most apparent to me, but in white America is like everybody was exactly the same. They all had $150,000 houses in the 90s, of course. They all drove the same two cars. All their kids went to the same 3 private or public schools. They all dressed their kids like they were way more pretentious than they actually were, and they taught their kids fit in. The nail that sticks out gets hammered, right? That type of shit. Oh, well, we want you to go to college. It's just an image thing. So they created, and I'm not completely placing the blame on them, but at the same time I am. So, but they force this image of what they want you to be on you for 18 years. And then when you go and you're taking in these experiences for yourself and you're like, fuck, that's not what this is. Like, I'm confused. I'm not this person. I don't want to be this way. Wow. Okay, so am I supposed to do what they're doing? That's super weird. I don't feel comfortable doing that, but I'll do it anyways because, mom and dad taught me to fit in. That's what I should do. I should be good at sports. I should get good grades. I should comb my hair. I'm not saying don't comb your hair or have hygiene, but they told me I should comb my hair. They told me that they want me to get into Stanford. They told me don't be a loser. They told me don't smoke weed. Okay, now what the fuck can I do? So now you're just
but the cool kids smoke weed. I took 15 years off of smoking weed because I worked for government defense contractors, and I couldn't. And a lot of guys fall into that camp too. They're like, hey, like they're hitting the bottle maybe a little too hard. Like, I prefer marijuana. Jaron, you say good things about it, but my job won't let me. Or if I piss test positive, I'm out of there. My whole life will unravel in front of me. But also, during the time I started smoking marijuana, I got really into fitness because we were locked down in California for COVID. All like the big bodybuilders created like underground or like garage gyms. So I trained with a professional bodybuilder and got in the best shape of my life. And when things did start opening up, I was like, okay, well, I look like these attractive people that I used to always see on TV. I want to go to the same gym they do. And I went to like one of those high cost gyms where like all the Instagram butt models film their shit. And I realized, oh, I'm like one of these people now. And also, when you get really fit, you cannot drink. Like alcohol and being lean and muscular do not go together. So all the fit people smoked weed. And for me, it's not like I didn't get into weed like, oh my God, I used to love it as a kid. I was always kind of ashamed I did it as a kid. And sometimes I still battle that. And I'll take a month or two off. I'm like, okay, am I better with or without weed? And I look at things objectively. I was like, well, people like me better. I kind of like myself better. I have a more positive outlook on life. My music improves faster. My bank account goes up faster. So is it really a bad thing? But when I first got back into it, a large part was like that fitness group. I'm like, being a former fat kid, I'm like, oh my God, I'm considered a fit person now. And all the fit people smoke. Like, that could be a thing too. Same thing with drinking. That's what the cool kids did. And then once it lit that alcoholic gene up, you're like, oh no, I'm going to carry this habit into, Wednesday night, me working by myself in Houston. It becomes a habit real quick there. But when we told our origin stories, I think a lot of it to a degree had like an identity component to it out above and beyond the obvious, physical and mental effects, because there's a reason to use substances or you engage in certain high risk type behaviors.
Yeah, identity plays a ton in it, but identity in the beginning is learned. So as you get older, you not only have to figure out what the fuck the world's doing, but you have to figure out how to unlearn all the trash that your parents taught you and relearn how to be a human being, while also now you've been drinking too much or now you've been smoking too much weed. Like, why in the world do you have to justify why you like smoking weed if you like smoking weed and that's your thing? You're not hurting anybody else. You're having a two-way conversation with yourself, and it's just it's null. Like, nobody's paying attention, right? Nobody's paying attention to the fact that you're smoking, or I'm drinking, or HUD's gambles, or Joel's addicted to salt.
You're right. It's a two-way conversation with the self that's not myself. It's a self that was created by society, by my parents, by my grandparents, by whatever.
Exactly.
Like I mentioned in Cancun, like I would have preferred to smoke the first day there, but I was like, I haven't seen my brother in a while, and I kind of ease him into the fact that I partake in those substances because we travel a lot together. We got like music festivals, and we backpacked across Europe and Central America together and stuff. So, but usually, you know, I don't see him that often, so I kind of have to ease him into that part of me. Whereas all my friends here, we smoke. Like I hang out with fit people and fun people and like creative type people. So most of my friends here prefer to smoke over drinking. And here in Mexico City is weird because they have private cannabis clubs that's like in a weird gray area legally. And the private cannabis clubs get the good stuff from like California, Colorado, BC. And it's almost like, I think there's an episode on Mad Men, if you guys ever watched that show, where like all the beatnik kind of hipsters in the 60s, like all the academic people and intelligentsia, like all the cool kids, they're having like a pop party and they're, exploring consciousness and expanding upon new ideas that are completely against the grain socially at that time. That's kind of how it is here. And I like running in those circles, and I like putting that part of myself out there with those types of people.
Well, it makes you more. It makes life much more interesting. Like that's what a lot of this is. The social aspect of all of these addictions makes life, whatever reality that you're experiencing in that moment, more exciting. We were talking about yesterday, 90 or maybe I don't know, day before yesterday. 95% of your reality is mundane. Like that's just reality. It's like walking around outside and there being nothing to look at. You know, depending on your perception, that could be peaceful or that could be erratic. I mean, depending on who it is, right? So that 5% of the time that you want to go out and that 5% of the time you want to balance the world, you want the world to balance your mundane life out. The lack of fulfillment you have from the other 95%. And maybe it's just that maybe the cure to addiction is to make that 95% less mundane.
The cure to addiction is community. I mean, hell, a lot of the times we do things is to escape. Right?
For sure.
Yeah, the support network.
If Jaron wouldn't have asked me to come on today, I would have been binging YouTube vids all day and eating.
Wait, you were watching this there
rather than being on.
You were going to sit there as an audience member and binge us?
Yeah, audience members, get in the chat or get on up here. Come on, guys. Yeah, like Steve said, it's a two-way communication street.
Yeah.
No, but I'm right there with you, Joel. Like, same thing. That's probably what I'd be doing too. You know, if I wasn't engaged in the conversation with something that I feel is meaningful, yeah, I would just be sitting watching videos, watching movies, not really doing anything. But instead, having conversations like this, even if it just helps one person or sparks something in somebody's head, that's enough. Yeah. That makes it good enough.
You're not going to change someone overnight, but you can make them think. And that's why I'm going to do more of the longer form type streams. I know the channel won't grow as much, but I reach a lot more people more directly. And to be honest, like for coaching clients or group memberships, the longer form content converts better. I'll be fully transparent about that. But the way I'm wired is if I'm sitting at home alone watching a YouTube video, in my head, I'm actively engaging with it. So I got to the point, like, instead of watching YouTube all day, why don't I just go on YouTube? The conversation we're having right now is a conversation I'd be having in my head watching Joel's channel. Like, why don't I just get the guys up here and put it out there and expand these ideas? Because that's the way I naturally think. And like you said, the community aspect, I'd much rather have this conversation with you guys rather than creating characters in my head and having these debates, because that's the way my brain naturally works. And I think a lot of guys watching these types of content creators probably are wired in a similar degree.
For sure. Yeah. I get that way every time I watch Fresh and Fit. I'm like, I would just love to be on there and just, talking red pill and stuff. And it's like,
dude, I never meet those types of girls when I go to Miami. I always get like the hot Colombians, Venezuelans, and Cubans. I don't even meet those trash girls.
Oh, That's awesome.
anywhere.
Yeah, like I just don't run in
Yeah.
those circles, but it
Yeah,
is entertainment.
It is entertaining, and it's funny because in Kansas we call them 304s. Like,
Yep.
she's a hoe.
What does
That's
that
we
mean
call her.
again?
A hoe.
A
H-O-E.
304
Yeah. What does
turned
the 304
upside down
stand
on a calculator says ho.
Oh, I didn't.
Okay.
Oh, I didn't even know that. I just call
Like
her a
boobs.
304.
Dude, didn't
Dude, I
you
knew all
take
the boobs
math?
equations in school. Yeah.
You have no arithmetic.
Yeah, I never turned my
Zeros are
calculator.
right, baby.
No, no.
Joel, are you the one Asian that sucks at math? Are you breaking the mold there?
I was good at math.
Yeah, I was
I'm
actually
almost
good at
ashamed
math
to say it.
too.
I was pretty good at
I
math.
just didn't
You didn't
like
even
it.
go with the. You didn't even go with the joke. God damn it!
I know,
Oh, I
yeah,
missed a
you
joke.
killed the punchline. Thanks,
Shit.
Joel. Appreciate it.
My-
Look like a dick
my
on my
bad. That's-
channel.
that's
the
an
only
Asian
Asian
thing, baby.
anybody's ever met that's bad at math. Come on now. Oh man. No,
I
I
wasn't
never
good at
dropped my
college
calculator
math,
on
I
the
will say
floor
that.
after. Yeah, never dropped my calculator on the floor, so I didn't know the 304 was so. But that makes sense. That's
I was weird with
actually
math.
In the
a
same way,
profound discovery in my life.
I learned math through drugs and finance. It's like I was always good at it, but I never liked it. I'm like, oh, I have to do math homework. Fuck. Like I always got straight A's, but I'm like, oh, this sucks. But then when it came time to like chemistry, I remember having a hard time in chemistry, like balancing equations. But then once I got access to like the fertilizer shed on the farm, I'm like, oh, I can blow shit up out here. I was really good at chemistry really fast when it came time to like making homemade explosives.
wait,
I
what?
probably shouldn't say that publicly. I'm not a terrorist, just a bored kid in the country. That's what we do. We'd buy old trucks and like fucking shoot them up just because there's no internet then. It was
With
the
the
90s,
granddad who bought way too
2000s,
much
yeah.
urea for
Yeah,
spreading
exactly.
in the orchards. Yeah.
Or when it came to finance, like, oh, all of a sudden, I know how to do these calculations in my head. Or the drug thing too. I love it when people are like, you see those memes, like the U.S. is the only country on the metric system, or Americans will use anything but the metric system to measure. I'm like, I learned the metric system, one, when I moved to Mexico, but two, like I did a couple steroid cycles down here, and I did smoke a bit, and I'd go out and like, if you do drugs of any kind, you know the metric system.
Oh wait, yeah. What do they call it instead of being an eighth? What do they call it?
I
It's
don't
in
do that.
grams.
To
Must be in
be, yeah, they
grams.
just do it in grams. To be honest, I don't even buy it in eighths. Well,
One eighth
here,
is 3.5 grams. That's why I was asking if they had something different. I just was curious.
here, let me see. They do put the denominations, but I always text my guys, so I don't even really know. They never say like un octavo de marijuana. They never say that. Usually it's by like the dollar amount too.
Oh, okay.
So here, let me-
Yeah, I was just curious. I mean, it doesn't really fucking matter. But
No,
I just-
I'm curious. I'm curious now too. On the menus,
How
they do.
addiction is ruining men. We now don't know the metric system.
Yeah,
we're-
right.
Yeah, I know the metric system, but
That's
hold on,
fine.
let me look it up. I don't know the metric system.
Yeah, no shit.
Okay,
I have a calculator in my phone.
Yeah, so my guy doesn't sell them in eighths. It's onza, medio onza, cuarto de onza, and then a fourth is the lowest they
In
go.
ounces, and yeah, gotcha.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
so that's how
Okay.
they do it.
Makes perfect sense. Not that I could see a fucking word on that on your screen, but yeah.
I just show it up there because you get guys in the comments like, nah, like they don't do it that way, or like on the dating topics, like, dude, you don't get Tinder matches. Like, are you serious? I'm a fucking white guy in Mexico who's crushing it. You know how many fucking Tinder matches I get a day? It's ridiculous. I can't even keep
That's
track of them
funny.
all.
What is it like two?
So I'm like, no, there's a real weed menu. That's
They
that's
must
where
be
it
on the
came
metric
from.
system.
Yeah. Which is funny. That negated my point. I'm talking about how you learn metric system when you use drugs, and then I look at my weed guy's menu and it's all in ounces.
Have you ever bought an ounce? Like just a Percy ounce?
I don't smoke that much, to be honest. Like I smoke frequently. I've been taking blips off of this, but I don't smoke large quantities. My like whenever I buy a cart, it'll last me for it depends on how much I'm using, but up to like 6 months. I usually have a sativa cart and an indica cart. It'll last up to like 6 months. And then my guy gives me like a 1/4 ounce of something, and it dries out, and like, you know, everything falls off it's Mexican
He's
weed. So a
sprinkling
lot
it
of
on
it's, you know,
chicken before he
sticks and
fucking
shit.
throws
Yeah.
it away.
So it like turns into a powder, and I'm just like
He's going-
I just give it away to people, because even like the dealers always give you freebies, obviously, of other stuff. So
That's
like
how you
I just
stay jacked,
stockpile it
dude.
and give it to people.
That's how you stay jacked. You get that basil, get that shake and bake, throw your chicken around in that shit.
Oh, dude, yeah. I'm gonna sprinkle my dried out swag weed on my chicken. That's what I'll do.
That's exactly it, dude. That's why I did this. That's like you roll in the bag together so it fucking flakes off.
Yeah.
All right, this
funny.
conversation
This is about addiction, right?
So downhill.
Yeah.
This is about addiction, yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
we can have
that's
some fun
why
with
that's why you
too.
can still smoke, because you make it last that long. Like most people
Yeah.
that are addicted to weed, an ounce lasts like 3 days.
Oh
I
yeah,
use
I
the,
do.
So
Yeah.
I take the minimally viable dose approach with everything. With my TRT, I'm on HGH2. With all of my dietary stuff, like what's the minimal amount I can do to get optimal results? And it does suck because I will catch myself smoking too much weed where it's like, okay, it always happens when I go to California. The first time I smoke, someone's passing around a spliff, 1 or 2 hits, I'm good. But like they're sucking down the whole thing. And so then, and it takes like 20 minutes to creep on you. Then you're like, okay, now I'm really high. Now I feel weird and my head's buzzing and I'm lazy and I don't want to go out and do anything that I plan to do on this trip. There's a reason I came up here in the first place. I have meetings and I have people that I need to go out with and catch up with and leads to follow up on. And now I just want to lay on the couch and do nothing. So if you overdo it, yeah, weed will do that to you. So I try to do the minimally viable dose. Usually,
Oh, I've ripped one and then been standing at the line at the guy in the gas station just to buy a soda and forgot what I was doing.
Oh, that's fun.
Completely.
Oh, that's
those are the
super fun.
best. Best days, man.
Or when
Sir?
homeless people in California
Sir?
talk to you and you're like, I get this guy. Like you understand what they're saying and you engage them in conversation. And then sober me's walking around like, oh, yeah, that guy's gross. Like fucking stay away from him.
Hey, here's one thing that I want to
Oh,
make
so
sure we
funny.
touch on before we end this conversation.
Yeah, we can go up to like 3 hours or so. It's
Tapering.
Yep.
Tapering when it comes to addictions. Okay.
That's my
So-
approach.
And it's interesting, like because I had mentioned before, like I love alcohol and I had problems with it in the past. And so instead of taking shots or drinking vodka or different things like that, switching to lesser alcohol type drinks. It's very important that when you're going through a process like this, instead of going cold turkey, as Joel had mentioned, which in a lot of times can be great, just kind of cut it off. Tapering down, like let's say you have 5 drinks in a day, and then you have 4, and then you have 3, and then 2, and then 1, and then none. That is a great way to wean yourself off, especially like even with weed. Let's say you smoke a blunt a day. All right, I have a blunt. Then I have half a blunt. Then I have a joint. And then I have a small bowl. And then I have a one hitter. Wean yourself down. I personally, in my experience, I think that's the best way to approach this when you're trying to break addiction. Because I think if you try and break addiction cold turkey, sometimes it's such a shock to your system that your relapse potential is huge.
That's my approach too. I will go cold turkey if, like Steve mentioned, if it's something like I normally don't drink, but there are times where, I'll string a couple of days together and I don't need to wean myself off drinking. Like I've been 6 months without drinking. I drank 3 days straight. I just cut it cold because I want to go back to baseline as fast as possible. That's the only time I do that. But like the first time I weaned myself off of alcohol, yep, it was reduce 1 beer a day. I simultaneously did that with cigarettes too. Switched over to vaping. And then at that point, okay, what do the next 30 days look like? And then I was like, well, I'm kind of sloppy from the alcohol, cleaned up the diet, did like a keto thing, dropped all the fat. What do the next 30 days look like? I went on a 90-day bulk. Okay. And what do the next 30 days look like? I did a 90-day cut. And then I think it was like September, October timeframe where I was weaning myself off the alcohol and cigarettes. By April 1st, I had a 6-pack. I had never been in that kind of shape in my life. Went to Coachella with my brother. And yep, drank all weekend, smoked cigarettes all weekend, smoked weed all weekend, did whatever we did. But it was a much different effect than the 6 months prior when I was just trying to drown out my sorrows and avoid all of the things that were burdening my shoulders in the world that I had to take care of. But, I'll just drink and then thinking though these problems will go away, they just exacerbate. So again, it was quite a different experience. And I typically, if it's like an addiction, I'll taper off. But if it's something like, okay, I rolled for most of EDC, again, minimally viable dose. I take like a quarter tab of ecstasy, and then I'd crush it up and put it in. You need electrolytes, so take your Gatorade Zero packets, put it in your drink, quarter gram of ecstasy, and then just kind of sip on it throughout the day, just so like you're not out of this fucking world, you're not having an out of body experience, but you're vibing the music. You can wear your sunglasses, the lights are overwhelming, but you're still there. Those types of things, just cold turkey, just cut it right off.
I would have never even thought about that. I just learned some shit about a drug I'll never do.
There's a chemical component to every drug too. So things like any of like your amphetamines or like Adderall, if you're like, oh, I'm riding a little too high, I believe it's citric type products like orange juice, or here in Mexico, limes are so
Uh,
cheap; they just fucking throw kilos at you when you order anything. So
if
big,
you ever
big old thing
want to
of lime
know,
water. Yep.
if you ever want to know anything about drugs, this is the weird person in me. I'm so passionate about it. My mom was a pharmaceutical sales rep, so drugs were a part of my life from very early on.
Are you
I
in sales
love.
too? I did ask you that earlier.
No, I'm not in sales
Oh,
actually,
surprisingly, yeah.
but I do sell consulting.
Yeah, I need to get better at sales
Everybody's
too.
in
I was
sales.
following up on leads today. I was like, you know what? If I'm gonna make money on my channel, like I need to come up with a sales strategy too, and actually treat it like a fucking business.
But what I was saying is, if you ever want to know anything about drugs, even if you have no plan to ever do it, I probably could whip something out of my ass without even having to look it up. That's how I find it fascinating how it
Mhm.
affects the brain structure and how everything breaks down. It's super cool.
I have a
Yeah.
whole like methodology, and it's very colorful and visual in my head when I'm rolling a joint. So like when a girl's like, "Oh, I want a blunt," like maybe I'll base it in CBD, and then I'll get like the high on that menu I showed you. There's different levels. I'll get like a higher blend, and I look for very specific properties. I'm like, what kind of experience do we want to have tonight? Like, how do I already feel? How do I feel now? How do I want to feel? And then like I construct it like a takeout order, like each like everything, every blunt or joint does or what effect I'm looking to get out of it. And that's funny too, like because and you everyone on here, like you guys are obviously smart, so anytime I get into something new, like obviously you watch all the YouTube videos, you read all the fucking articles, you read all the literature, all the research, and then once you have your own internal framework, you kind of forget about it, but you still follow that operating system that you set up for yourself as it pertains to that topic.
Yeah, that was me with food, like with like diet.
I did that with my diet, did that with
Oh
training,
my
did that with
goodness, dude,
hormone
it's so bad.
optimization. Like I
I
can
could be a
visualize exactly how everything needs to come together for what I'm
yeah.
looking to do.
I could probably consider the way that I treat that an addiction too. Like honestly, because I probably spend at least an hour a day reading about different antioxidants, micronutrients, try to figure out how to get them into the diet or how this water does this, chemical properties of this and that. Like it's all over the place. That's why I was just I forgot to take my vitamins today. I got like 7 bottles sitting in front of me of just random stuff that I don't like. I don't necessarily need to take this to live, but thinking optimally, magnesium, NAC or NAC, ashwagandha, zinc, all this stuff is like just these little micro changes in your psychology. So they're all brain, like to me, they're all brain drugs.
I'm intrigued.
Totally. I got my supplements right there.
Yeah, I see
I'm
'em.
with you,
I got
Steve.
I got a pile.
I do notice when I stop taking them, it makes a difference. So
It does.
I get that sometimes. Like, am I being OCD with this? But then when you do take a break, you're like, oh, I feel a little off.
You can feel it.
Does make a
Like
difference.
I'll go on and off creatine, and then I realize, especially too, I have high altitude here, so I'll gas out like a rep or two short. Well, you put the creatine back in, and just that little bit, like it gives you just a little oomph, a little bump, so to
For
speak.
sure. Jaron, I kind of wish I would have found your approach when I was using, because like I never had that mentality for using. It was like, how fucked up can we get as fast as possible? There was never like,
Oh, we've been there for dude.
analyze.
Yep. I think that's a good thing to talk about too. Again, the way certain drugs or behaviors have an effect on you. For me, like with the alcohol, it was never like, how fucked up can I get? It's like, I feel shitty and I want to feel not shitty. So what does it take to feel not shitty to where I don't feel more shitty tomorrow? And you kind of, Hudson talked about it, you find that threshold or that line. So for me, like as I've gotten better personally, that threshold goes down more and more and more. Like the Cancun thing, like I'm not going to dive nose first into a fucking plate full of blow. Like just give me a little baby bump. Just to, it's like a really, really, really,
Yeah.
really, really strong coffee.
It's like you don't want to walk up. You don't want to walk up and have like these massive fat fucking lines that people are.
You're gonna
doing.
die. That's how Chris Farley.
Yeah,
Well, I
it's
think
like
he had heroin.
I'll take a key bump. You know exactly what that is.
Yep.
I'll take a key bump. That's it. Like no.
I need an energy
limit.
drink, but I don't
Little
want to drink an
Tootsie.
energy drink.
Tootsie.
Oh, there we go. Yep.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's just being safe. And yes, we're exploring the world. From toddlers, when we were children crawling around, all we were doing was exploring the world to understand it. We're still doing the same thing today. Understand that. We are just exploring the world. but understand when you put your hand on a hot stove, you may get burnt.
That's a
Highly
good point
likely.
too.
Lesson
So
101.
guys,
Yeah.
for example, if you whatever addiction you might find yourself falling into, if your initial reaction, and there's always a ritual to it too. So like as you're like, all right, I'm off work, I'm driving home, like got everything taken care of, like now it's time to pop that first top. If your internal dialogue is like, hell yeah, we're getting fucked up, or I've been out with groups of guys that do this. We go to a bar like, yeah, dude, we're gonna fight someone. It's like, no, we're not. Or I'm gonna go somewhere else where like there's a more kind of low key, mellow vibe. Like I like good music. I like the environment and all that stuff. But like, I don't want that to be a part of my evening. If you find yourself having that internal dialogue, or if you verbalize it even public, like, yeah, we're getting fucked up, then that might be an indicator that it's an issue. Whereas if it's like, you know what, I like craft beers and, you know, my buddy's going to go out drinking and, you know, or like when I lived in San Diego, I got into IPAs for a bit because you're not a true San Diegan unless you go through an IPA phase. It's like, all
No
right,
doubt.
yeah, I'll try out my IPAs, but dude, getting drunk on IPA sucks. Like
Yeah, it's the
one
worst.
or two of those guys and you're good. You know, your evening's over.
Yep. Acid reflux like crazy and everything. I remember.
Exactly what I thought about. Yeah. Just
Yeah.
cut
Flights
right
of
here,
beer,
just
6
full.
flights of beers later, and now you're starving because you just drank 400 fucking carbohydrates.
Do you guys watch
Yeah.
South Park at all? Randy Marsh? Like, no, it's called The
I
Flight.
haven't.
It's classy.
It's classy.
I'm not an alcoholic. It's classy.
It's just a tasting. It's just a tasting, Sharon.
That being said, I'd be interested to explore the
That's great.
topic too. A question just came in, but I'll pose this question in terms of social classes, because it seems like when I lived in Houston, my buddies always made fun of me because for whatever reason, wherever I go, I always have a lot of black buddies because we like the same shit, like gyms and shooting and, you know, banging chicks and shit. It's like half my friends end up being black anywhere I go. But in Houston, they're like, oh, you do them white boy drugs, which is like your coke, your ecstasy, your MDMA, your marijuana, your shrooms. But not, although I'd say fentanyl and methamphetamine are white people drugs now too, unfortunately. But I've noticed that there's like kind of a class thing with drugs. The way I classify them in my head, it's kind of like pharmaceutical products when it says like do not mix with alcohol. You're just like, wait, does that mean it's going to shut down my organs and I'm going to die in my sleep and not realize I died? Or does it mean you're going to get really fucked up and you probably should like plan for a calm night in? Drugs are that way too. Like as a kid, it was always like all drugs are bad. Marijuana is a drug, ergo it is bad. But tobacco's legal. It's unhealthy, but it's not bad because it's legal. Alcohol is legal. It's not. Don't take it too far. But there's certain classes of drugs. Like if someone offered me like heroin or methamphetamine, thank God they gave me morphine once when I was a kid, and it like any opiates makes me just throw up. So like my body can't handle them. I'm so glad I have whatever gene that is. So like I wouldn't be attracted to it. But someone's like, hey, do this drug, but there's a 90% chance if you do it once, it'll ruin your life. Or like Cocodrill, like that drug in Russia where like your flesh starts falling off and shit. There is a line with certain things where I'm like, okay, well, I'm in Miami and my buddy offered me a bump. Like I'm wearing a white linen suit and like a pink shirt. So like, yeah, I can do a little bit, like I've got a hot climate. I can do a little bit of coke, but there's a difference, I think, in the class of drugs too, or again, to include broader addiction behavior type patterns.
So rephrase
That's a
that
good
question
point.
once more so I can answer it.
So earlier we posed the question, good drugs versus bad drugs. Is there a socioeconomic element to it? I believe the answer is yes, because like poor
course,
people usually,
because-
they use the
100%.
drugs that'll fucking kill them and destroy their lives. Whereas
Well,
rich
they're going to
people
get the drugs that
weed
are
coke.
cheaper, and typically the drugs that are cheaper are also the ones that can be more dangerous.
Yeah,
And it
that's
goes
why-
reverse too. Like the rich kids will get sometimes the more addicted, like the pills, because they can get prescribed stuff and they'll get the better coke. So it's just, they get more addicted to it. And so I think it like both extremes, it kind of goes downhill for both.
Yeah, I think that's what it is. I think it's the extremes. It's the extreme bottom and the extreme top that have the biggest issues with everything. And then it's in the middle is kind of where things even out.
For sure. For
Just
sure. I was
a bunch
middle
of weed in the
class
middle.
growing up, and I think because of that middle class upbringing, there was always that like conscious in the back that's like, don't overdo this. Like this isn't good for you. Whereas maybe someone that comes from so low in the social hierarchy and has had so much trauma, because trauma is a huge part of addiction too, is like the experiences that happen with a kid. And like maybe neglect from parents and stuff, like that's going to lead to addiction. And then on the reverse side, a lot of, as you hear, like the trust fund babies, they don't always have the best relationships with their parents because, well, just their parents are working, or they just kind of have kids for the social things, for the social status. And, you know, you see how many kids just go off the rails that came from great wealth. So yeah,
All right, I'm going to
that
pop
flip
this
side too.
question on the screen. We can explore this topic and then probably start wrapping up around hour 3 to not get too excessive with the length here. So Ian Gunderson asked, Joel, can you talk more about ego death in relation to drug use? If you haven't already, there's a second part to that. Naturally occurring drugs, I think of good drugs, hallucinogenics, processed drugs, heroin, meth, I think of bad drugs. And yeah, we didn't touch on that. We can do it on another stream, but like certain things like mushrooms or like your peyote or your more spiritual kind of journey type. I call it plant medicine rather than drugs. I think there is a difference between that too, because the intent or the desired outcome is much, much different. But Joel, if you can address that, ego death in relation to drug use.
For sure. Shout out Ian. Ian and I were roommates in college.
Oh,
So,
cool.
Yeah.
Steve and I are roommates too. Ian, get up here. What are you doing?
Yeah, what's up,
Get up
dude?
there, Ian.
Yeah,
Be a
well,
lot
we're
of drugs
gonna
together.
up here soon.
Let's
Yeah,
just
next
say that.
time. Yeah.
So yeah, really, thanks for coming on, Ian. And ego death. Yeah, I think, I mean, for me, ego death happens quite often in relation to drug use. It's whenever there's a big change in something in one's life, there's going to be an ego death, because I think as humans, whatever we're doing, we create an identity out of it. So even something as simple as changing a job, that can cause an ego death, because it's like, oh, I was this person. I had all that, like I did this every single day. And now suddenly I'm just this other person that's going to do all this other stuff. And it can be scary. And that's why I think a lot of people don't make changes, because they don't want to have to experience that ego death. I think a great example would be like parents, for example. Like my folks kind of stayed in the same, they didn't really push themselves too much after a certain age. And it's because they didn't want to experience that ego death. And so, yeah, I think, you know, like the guys are talking about in here, if that's something that is holding you back from quitting an addiction, I think it's a really good idea to get around people, get a community that's going to support you through that ego death and help you realize that, you may be having this spiritual change, but you're still loved and cared for, and you're not this black sheep, and your soul's not, going to hell, or whatever stories
Or
might be going
a
around the
community
mind.
of people that match your new identity, like the example I gave of stop drinking and then got in the fit scene, but all the fit people smoke.
100%. Yep.
And I would say too, like a group of people that, yeah, they may kick you down and be hard on you, but they do it because they care, instead of trying to hide things away. I think that's important.
Yeah, that's a tough group to get into. Like the people that are going to tell you the truth. Like I always avoided those groups. I wanted the groups that are like, "You're good, man. Like keep doing you." And then finally, like coming onto the Red Pill space, like finding Jaren's channel. Like I'll listen to one of Rich Cooper's vids, and when you're in it too, Jaren, and I won't leave being like, "Oh, wow, I was living this kind of illusion," on some degree, because there's just so much truth into what a lot of you guys talk about. But I think ego death happens too, like in the dating space, as you guys know. Like I'm in the first year of pickup, of doing cold approach and stuff.
You have to kill the negative parts of yourself and develop the positive parts.
Dude, I can't wait to get through this. Like that's half the reason I'm doing this. So I just don't have to do this again, because it fucking hurts.
Once you get it, you got it. And then you realize I'm never going to have a problem in this area of my life ever again. And then you can focus on other things.
It honestly, it becomes, and we'll talk more like behind the scenes about this. It's so fun once you figure it out. Life just becomes a game.
I enjoy it. Like
Wow,
I literally feel like I can have any girl I want whenever I want, and usually I'm not wrong.
Chads.
Yeah.
Ian and I have been talking.
You can get there. I mean, it's a skill set you have to develop, and
100%.
Anybody can get there.
Yeah, I'm not the richest guy. I'm not the best looking guy. I'm not the most high status guy or any of that shit. I was a nerd when I was growing up, so you can learn it.
Ian and I have actually, this is a personal note. Ian and I have been talking to him, like I've told him I'm going to plan and move to Poland. I think first Texas and then Poland to get, because Jared and I talked about this too. Asians don't do well in the West. It's just the truth. And
Charles E and I did a study on that, and he has a PhD and I'm a master's. You could probably get that published, but yeah, we did like an actual academic study on that. I'll try to dig up the post and share it with you, but Yeah, it was quite
That'd be sick.
surprising. We went within the, like a 2-mile radius of Harvard, and then put like my profile, like just all shirtless pics, douchebag version of my Tinder profile, and Charles like sophisticated, high class, indicators of high net worth, and it was like one match to my 50. It was ridiculous, even like the most liberal parts of the U.S. So yeah, and then
Wow.
we tested some other variables too, but I'll try to find that post and I'll share it with you guys. That was interesting. Little study we did in one of our groups,
Thanks,
which
man.
I'll pitch my group here in a minute, but yeah, we can start wrapping it up.
And we'll talk after Ian. So give you a call.
All right, cool. Like, guys, we covered a lot of area. Is there anything else that we needed to mention? Any addenda,
For me.
or we can throw it on to like a follow-up show topic. I know I'm starting these casts with more broad type titles because I want to identify kind of what's out there, what the audience is experiencing, if there's any recurring themes between us, and then start to drill down on the ideas, because I love to intellectually explore new territory. And I think this is a fantastic conversation. It sounds like you guys do too. So if you want, we can go around the horn, let everyone know who you are, what you're up to, where they can find you. If you have anything to offer them to take these types of talks a step further. And Huds, if you want, we can start with you.
Sure. Yeah. So, Huds, I'm a dating coach. Talked about a lot of great things tonight. I am loving these conversations. We'll see where they all go. If you ever want to reach out to me, let's see if I get this right. At the Hudsman right there on Instagram. That's the best way to reach me. You can DM me. I love doing this stuff. So go ahead and reach out to me if you got a question or something. I will be happy to answer. And also from there, you can book a call or something else if you would like to, or if you want to look at joining my private men's community. Other than that, keep doing this stuff. I got some other stuff in the works, and I'll talk more about that in the future. But for right now, that's about it.
Joel, yep.
Cool. Yeah. Joel,
Bring it home.
yeah. I have a YouTube channel, Sobriety University. Check it out. I have pretty much weekly addiction content, mainly marijuana focused, but I also have interviews with people that dealt with like
I probably didn't help your channel. I kind of spent like an hour glorifying it on today's stream, but
oh, thanks, man.
Yeah.
Appreciate that.
No, I'm saying glorifying marijuana use. I'm probably not helping your brand.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you guys want to smoke, hit up Jaron. But if you want,
yeah, right.
Not smoke,
if you want to come down to Mexico City and bang Colombians and smoke, we can jam. I'm gonna get some bongos in the house so you can participate.
That's a real hard offer to pass, man. Bang,
I know,
bang
right?
Hot chicks and smoke weed, or get sober.
That's my high ticket offer. Yeah, I need to price that out.
So check it out. I'm going to be starting doing some more coaching, getting certified for to have some more techniques to be able to help you guys, and definitely, hopefully, I have an interview with Jaron. You guys can check out. We talk a bit about it, what we talked about today, and then some more like kind of red pill content and stuff. Check that out as well. And for the boys, I hope I can get both of you on the channel for an interview. That would be great. And I think you guys have a lot of value to give, Steve and Hudsman. So definitely keep an eye out for these two. And yeah.
Sweet.
Steve, you're up. Batter up.
Oh, peace out.
Yeah, we're closing. Yeah. Where do people find you? What do you got going on?
Later, guys. Let's go.
Yeah. I ain't selling shit. I'm just here chilling.
No, I ain't selling shit. I'm just here to talk. Let's go.
All right, cool. That's Esteban the Bold on Instagram. And then for me, I'm selling stuff. Oh, guys. No. If you need, like these guys are all great guys. Hit up any of them if you need any of these things. Like I say on these things, like I've got a private men's community too. I do coaching offers too. Much like when I work with my buddy Ma for other content creators, like people will resonate with different content creators or shit. Try us all out if you want to. But some of the HUDs I talk on the dating topics, fitness topics, personal finance. I need to start covering more location independence type topics, get more into the expat type stuff. Those videos do well for me. But any of those types of topics, like guys, if you've been following me for a while, you know kind of what I'm about. If you have any follow-up questions, if you want to get up on the show someday, if you want to stay anon, if you do want to get in my private men's community, Instagram at Jaron Scott. In terms of the men's community, I'll give a pitch real quick. So that is an extension of Rich Cooper's top 1% community and his entrepreneur level communities. It's me and a couple of the top 1% generals that manage that group. It's a $9.97 lifetime membership fee as of posting this video. That is compared to the top 1%, which is $3,997 annual fee. So if you're not quite at that level, the top 10% group is for guys that aren't quite at like six figures yet, is kind of how we priced it out. And it is a lifetime membership. The goal of that group is to get you into the top 10%. Yes, I'm a nerd. We quantify all those metrics to the top 10% of men based on whatever quantifiable metric is important to you in your life, whether that's income, whether that's lay count, whether that's body fat percentage, any of those indicators. We'll define that with you. And then once you get in that top 10%, then you should ideally graduate to higher levels. That's kind of how we structured it. Again, it's myself and a handful of really great guys. We cover a breadth of topics between our collective knowledge. So take advantage of that $9.97 lifetime membership fee. Reach me on Instagram at Jaron Scott for more info. And like always, please like, subscribe, share, leave any comments down below. Reach out to any of us directly if you need some more personalized attention. And if you do subscribe to the channel, which you should, do it now. It's free. And be sure to ring the notification bell and then actually enable all notifications. And that's with all these guys' channels too, because sometimes these topics do get a bit throttled in the algorithms. I've been looking at the analytics these last few days, and they're not always consistent in terms of, what's going to work, what's not. So that being said, guys, I'll bring it on home. Thank you for stopping on by. And until next time, we shall bid you all farewell.